I just recorded a 5-hour live stream of side project development. Then I handed it all to Opus 5 to edit and cut into a nice video. I worked on a markdown publishing site for myself. I read Jensen Huang's letter about open weight models, and I reviewed 2 interesting agent-related projects that I wanted to call attention to. This is the result of that stream edit. How does Claude do? Watch to find out. I don't know. This is a place for me to stream cool things that I think are cool, whether that be technology that interests me or new papers that I come across or a project that I'm working on that I really want to share and talk more about, or whether it's some industry happenings that I think I want to comment on or that I think I can provide a unique perspective on. And you might be asking, who are you? What the heck? Why would you even have any of these things? Well, my name's Eric Florenzano, and I've lived in Silicon Valley ever since 2008. And so however many years that is, I'm not going to try and do mental math on stream. It's 18 years. But anyway, so I've seen a bunch of the technology cycles that have happened in Silicon Valley, from Web 2.0 to the Facebook apps, and then the app revolution with iOS and Android. And then seeing some of the crypto stuff and seeing some of the virtual reality stuff. That's where I really dove in, was virtual reality over years. So I learned all about gaming and things like that. But also before that, I learned a lot about sort of distributed systems. And as the Web 2.0 ecosystem was blooming, we had to learn about how to scale databases and write transactions and how to do things in a scalable manner. So that's all been really interesting. And then I started a startup. Started out trying to be a communications platform and then pivoted a few times into an A/B testing platform for mobile. We were the first native mobile A/B testing solution, which was really cool. But we were acquired by Twitter, and so I was able to experience the ascendance of Twitter, and I was there for the IPO, which was pretty cool. But then I wanted to leave, and I talked about virtual reality. I dove into virtual reality head first and really tried to make a go of it. And I created a virtual reality indie game, which did reasonably well and supported my lifestyle for a while, but then kind of fell off a bit and wasn't able to support me anymore. So I got a job in augmented reality with a startup that ended up being acquired by Shopify. And now I've been at Shopify for about 5 years, and Shopify has been incredible. And I've had 3 different careers inside of Shopify too. With that augmented reality stuff, I was building out a lot of augmented reality stuff for the Shop app. And then I sort of moved over into doing a bunch of different augmented reality prototypes, which is a lot of it is public. And we were doing lots of sort of quick ideation and coming up with a bunch of different ideas and trying them all and seeing what would work. And then in the past 2 years or 3 years, I've worked a lot on machine learning and agentic systems and doing a lot of applied research in the agent space. So that a lot of that was stuff like fine-tuning models, reading and coming up with the latest papers that were where people were fine-tuning and they're continually training their models and finding ways to elicit better and better performance out of some of these open models that have been out. I remember I did a lot of grid searching on Code Llama 30B. That was a good one back in the day. But then after that, I've spent a lot of time doing agentic stuff. And agentic stuff is really where I'm at right now, where early last year, we were doing orchestration of many different agents. And that has become sort of industry standards. It feels like I was ahead of the industry a lot on some of this agentic stuff, but the industry's caught up. And so I do have a lot of the perspective of somebody who's been using it for the past few years. And I worked on the Sidekick project. So Sidekick is merchant facing. When you have a Shopify store and you log in and you want some help, the AI that we assist you is Sidekick. And I worked on that in the early days. And then later on, now I'm working on an internal assistant that helps everybody with their development. So there's a lot of developers inside Shopify, and we connected it all up, and we've created this system called River, which helps internal developers do all their work. And so I've learned just so much about how you can apply these systems at scale, external scale, and then internal scale, and all in between. And so that's who I am. That's my background. That's my perspective. In the early days, like when I was first entering into the industry, I was really into Python and Django. And I was involved not just in the community, but I also was involved in like podcasts and stuff like that, really deep into it. And as a side effect of that, I actually got really good at just talking about technology and Python stuff and Django stuff back then. It was really easy for me to just get up either on a podcast or get up on stage and talk about all these cool things. But more recently, I've had a couple of opportunities to give some more public talk to some of my stuff, and I've had a harder time. It turns out it's a skill that can atrophy. And so that's partly why I'm doing this channel, is to get practice about talking about this stuff again. And, when I'm in a one-on-one conversation with somebody, I find it really easy to give good explanations about some of this, all this technology stuff. And especially, I think I've had pretty good success demystifying some of the LLM stuff and some of the most recent research on LLMs. I find that I can explain it to people who aren't necessarily super technical, but only on a one-on-one conversation. When I get up in front of a crowd, or when I have to give a presentation, or even when I'm just talking to the camera like this, I struggle to figure out exactly what I need to say next and how I can phrase things and how things can be put in the best possible light. So a big part of this channel is just practicing and getting better at speaking about these technical subjects again, and finding the best cadence for how to go through things and all of that. So I don't need to give too many more examples, but that's the idea. That's why I'm doing this. And so I have a couple of ideas on what I want to do today. I've got a little bit of a plan. 3 basic things. The first thing is I want to do a project with Opus 5 came out just a few days ago. I've had a little bit of time to play around with it. I've done a lot with Fable 5 and a lot with Opus 4.8. I've done a lot with all the previous Claude models. And I'm really liking GPT 5.6 Soul in certain ways. So I'm curious how Opus 5 stacks up across all of these different options when there's a lot of good options now. I'm hearing really good things, but ultimately it's going to be up to my own experience on a project. And I have a pretty good idea for a project, which is really going to help support this channel and this work that I want to start. And it's a web project, so it's right in distribution of these LLMs. They love making websites things. And I have it deployed on a Kubernetes cluster. I actually have an existing app that I want to tear down and create something new and place it over the existing product. So that'll be kind of interesting. It's not just completely de novo. We're going to delete stuff and then recreate. And then afterwards, I want to talk a little bit about some of this open weights stuff that's going on in the industry and the sea change that seems to be happening there, where Jensen Huang has written a letter that a lot of different companies have signed on to. And what does that mean for the future? And what does that mean for the industry? And all of that. And then lastly, I've got a couple of interesting projects that I want to just talk about, share, and call attention to. And maybe we can explore them a little bit. So that's my plan. Let's do an Opus 5 test. Let's work on these. Let's look at the open weights letter. And then let's talk about some interesting projects that look cool. Okay, does that sound like a plan? Let's do it. So to start, I have this project that I called Neural Column, and it's actually live right now. It's neuralcolumn.com. And it looks like it was 9 and 10 months ago. So this is a while ago now. It was beginning of this year. And the idea behind this was I kept on feeling like, in the same way that I'm trying to create content here in video form, in the past, I've done a whole lot of blogging, and I've taken these ideas that I have and I've put them into words, and I post them as a blog post. And in the modern day, one of the other ways that I can communicate is I just did a long voice message to myself, like a long rant to voice note. And after I was like pacing along all up and down my apartment and like leaving like a 20-minute long voice note where I talked all about this like sort of idea I had or a project, or there was like 3 or 4 different voice notes that I was kind of looking at afterwards and thinking like, it would be so cool if these were blog posts. These weren't just these rambles, but that these were like cleaned up. The ideas behind it were put into a good order, and that it was turned into a more professional looking blog post that people might actually click through, read, and maybe get something from. Because it was always right after I had finished up ranting about, oh my gosh, this is orchestrating agents using this, that, and the other thing, whatever. And so I thought, well, wait a minute, like LLMs are incredible at this, and especially the longer you can rant, the more context you're giving to the agent, the better and more complete that blog post could be. And so I created this like little website where you create like a little session. Oh, and I actually went through a whole sequence of this where I totally over-engineered it at first. I built this whole like whisper speech detection thing, and I was like streaming the mic into the platform. And then as it would stream the audio waveform bit, the server would transcribe it and then send back the transcription. And then after a while, I kind of realized, wait a minute, like all these different platforms, they have dictation, they have audio dictation. So you could just like either tap on the microphone key or whatever. The only problem is that the dictation isn't very good. Like it's often misses words that you say, or it misunderstands certain words. And so, but I started experimenting with this concept of, so I created this thing where it opens up all it is a giant text box, and you press the dictation button on whatever platform you have to talk. And unfortunately, I'm on Linux right now, which is like the one platform that doesn't have built-in dictation. I could install it, but I don't want to do that just for this. So anyway, it would be this whole long thing, but it would have all these problems, and it would not always be perfect. And so what I did was I created this whole like pipeline of different prompts that you could use. And the first prompt was this cleanup prompt where like, okay, this is text, but it's text that's been captured through automatic speech recognition. Like understand that and try to correct for the speech recognition problems. And basically you give it some raw text, and then you can like pass in some notes and all of that. And so it removes things like and actually and and all these extra words that you don't really necessarily want. And so this whole thing is just about using all those context clues to try and fix, and using basically a larger model to try and fix up the transcript, but not trying to change the actual transcript. And then like I said, this was a pipeline. So after you get the transcript cleaned up, then I had this thing of creating these drafts, and the drafts, like the way that it worked is it spun up and it did like 3 different drafts. So you could pick between like, what are your favorite versions of this? And then after it created those drafts, you would pass back feedback. And then this was sort of the edit prompt where you would pass your feedback. You'd give it the draft, you'd give it the revision notes, and it would sort of like try to do targeted edits to those notes. So it was this whole pipeline for, I think like think out loud to article pipeline. That was how I originally said it. Now, what happened was, so there were a couple things that have happened. First thing is that I actually did a server migration, and at one point, and I needed to do it quickly because my previous server got compromised. That's another story for another day. But I think I used Claude to do the server migration, and Claude got almost everything, different databases. And this was just not one of the things that I checked, and it lost, I think, 3 or 4 of my articles. So when I did that server migration, it didn't migrate any of the data. So then after that, I didn't really contribute anymore. I didn't use it anymore. It wasn't a product that I was using actively. And why is that? I would say 2 reasons. Number one is that I wasn't necessarily getting the quality that I wanted out of those edits. I found that my rants were were being embellished in ways that I didn't really want, and I didn't have, I guess, like the energy or time to iterate on these default prompts to make better drafting decisions. And so that was another one. Also, my whole concept was to take the rant and turn it into 3 different drafts or 5 different drafts. I can't remember, but it's really annoying and difficult to read 3 to 5 different long drafts from a long rant that you've had finished ranting. So there was something fundamentally wrong with that concept. And then with these revisions, the revisions this is actually probably the part that worked the best. But these days, do you even really need this extra prompt there? I don't know. This was like using older models where they needed a little bit more help. And I think I was also using a cheaper model on that on purpose. So that's what I had. That was the concept behind this app. That's why it's not really being used anymore. I didn't ever really open it up for third parties. And I actually think that right now it doesn't work. Like, I think, let's see. Hello world. I think it's using a model that no longer exists. Yeah, okay. Moonshot, Kimi, K2. So you can see, I think that was using Grok, and I think Grok no longer supports this model. So that's what this was. This neural column was this idea of think out loud to article pipeline. Oh, I said two things. The first thing was that it basically, I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And the second thing is there seems to have been a very rapidly growing taboo on using an LLM to fully generate an article. Now, I think it's a little different in this case because it's so much source text is going in through my ranting and through like your dictation stuff. But at the same time, nothing guarantees that it's going to come out and be non-slop. And I just found that like it was creating slop, and there's basically increasingly a taboo against creating slop. So over time, and also the database migration problem. So all of that is reasons why this is kind of not great. But today, when I was getting started about doing this video, I was thinking to myself, it'd be great if I had a really great little markdown file editor where I could very easily work full screen on markdown files. And then I want it to be LLM integrated so that if I wanted to like do research and have it come back and reference something, or if I want to select some parts of it, type and say, I want this to be different. I think that there's a way to do an LLM integration that's not completely slopifying the entire thing. And then the main thing is I just want it to be super simple. I want it to be a super simple markdown editor where, yes, there's LLM stuff baked in, but no, the LLM stuff is not generating the entire thing and intermediating everything. So that's my idea for this new version of neural column. So yeah, let's get going. I have this checked out. It's the old version. I'm going to use Claude and actually not X-High. I'm going to do Ultra Code because I really am a big fan of these dynamic workflows that have been added in. I think they're really important. Dynamic workflows, not only do they help you like break down the problem into smaller parts and then compose it into a better whole, but also it can help you save on resources. You can do context compression. You can say, hey, all of the past messages from this session don't need to be given to this new sub-agent. The sub-agent can just like look at this one particular portion and return that. And then also the orchestrating agent doesn't have to look at all the stuff that the sub-agent did just to get to that one thing. So I really am a big fan. And also I just think like over time, these dynamic workflows are going to become more and more of a standard part of the beginning of these flows. And you'll have dynamic workflows that are less dynamic because you've done things 5, 10, 20 different times, and it can start to match against your existing workflows and just use those. So I think like I'm really bullish about dynamic workflows and their usage in the future of all this stuff. But who knows? The future is unwritten. We'll see if it's very notable that Codex in their version of sort of their Ultra does not necessarily codify their workflows as overtly as Claude Code does. When Claude Code does a dynamic workflow, it writes out the entire script first, and it must execute through that script. And only after that script is completely executed does it like kind of look around and say, okay, how did that go? Whereas with Codex's version, it spins up a whole team of agents sort of on the fly as it needs a new agent. And then it has this mailbox, this sort of mail back and forth where the agents can communicate. And so Claude also has that with teams, but it seems to be that what Codex does is teams with Claude, it's like it spins up a single team. And then that one team has ways of communicating. And that team is a little bit more rigid. Whereas with Codex, it seems to be that like, hey, I wish I had some agent for that purpose. It spins up an agent. Hey, I wish I had an agent for that purpose. It spins up an agent. Hey, I no longer need that. And it just like, it's constantly spinning up and spinning down agents and using them to communicate with the main orchestration process. And it's not entirely clear which way of those is the better way of doing things. So I am a little bit more partial to the Claude Code way of doing things, because what's really cool about it is once you have a a dynamic workflow that's working, it can kind of it actually completely hands off control to that workflow. That workflow is the thing that's in charge of moving the session forward. And you don't even have to be spending tokens on your largest orchestration model, like polling it or like checking its progress. Like the workflow engine is the thing that's pushing the session forward. So anyway, sorry, that was a long sort of rant on dynamic workflows versus, or I guess it's Ultra Code versus GPT-5.6 Sol Ultra. But anyway, short, I'm just going to say, hey, this is a repo that I haven't worked on a while. I want to leave the Kubernetes infrastructure in place, but I want to completely replace the website as it exists with a brand new concept. First, map out all of the existing contents of this website and get rid. Make sure you understand it, what you can and can't delete. Let's just start with that for now, I think. Please don't do anything yet, but be an expert in the current system such that you could confidently. Okay, so sometimes I do this. Sometimes I just do a one-shot query where I just say, go do this thing. But often I have it map out the current flow and I have it really build an understanding. And I think one of the key parts of this is saying, build up to the point where you could confidently handle, like, I really like the word confident or confidently when you're telling it how far to go, because really it's about its own internal representations, and it needs to build up an understanding such that its internal representations start to trigger on the word confidently. And so I don't know, that's the way I think about it, is that I want it to, I don't want it to just like explore the Claude.md or the readme.md. I want it to actually be going all the way into exploring the code here for the neural column thing in this Backblaze thing. And I dropped the new key information here. Now I'm not going to click on that so that I don't leak the key. It's not a big deal. It's a single application. Nothing exists in this bucket yet. So if anybody got it right now, it wouldn't be a huge deal. But I don't exactly want to leak it, and hopefully the agent itself is okay with that as well. So this is going to be interesting. In the past, when I'm writing code, I can narrate while I'm writing the code, but this is a little bit of a new world where we have to just sit here and kind of wait while it writes code. And I guess one thing I could do is just note these as edit sections, and we can fast forward through these and edit. But also, I think when it comes to making this content, maybe this is where I'm going to have to start to think about content to have for a while this is going. We'll just see how this goes. For now, I'm just going to I'll talk about whatever feels natural, and then I guess we'll zoom forward through parts where I didn't have anything to talk about, or when I needed to stop and take a drink, like this. This is a great example of these types of dynamic workflows. If you haven't used the dynamic workflows yet, this is kind of what I was talking about before, where it has created a script in JavaScript that describes this. And I have this on our dangerously skip permissions. So it didn't ask me if I wanted to run the workflow, and I have it on Ultra Code. So it's going to naturally do a workflow when it thinks that there's a good situation for it. And so this is exactly one of those situations where it's going to pull up a workflow, because I wanted it to explore the entire code base. Now, this is interesting because it's picking its own same model for everything. It's not, sometimes I've seen where it pulls Haiku or Sonnet for some of these exploration things. But I think this is a pretty good way of doing it. This is a way of saying, hey, this might take a ton of context. Let's not like pollute our entire context with all these different things. Let's send out one app just to look at the DB and all the models. Let's send out another agent to look at all the API routes. And it's going to come back with this really highly compressed, highly informed summary of all this stuff. So we can take a look at this. In fact, I believe we can scroll down and see this. I wish I could see the prompt. This says read every file under neural column server models plus DB config security, blah, blah, blah. Produce a complete map of the persistence layer. I need verbatim accurate. Every SQL Alchemy model class, the enums, the mix-ins, how IDs are generated, DB, config, every settings field, security, migration, be exhausted. It's like a great prompt. I could never hope to write a prompt this good. So I'm really glad these models are getting better at prompting themselves. So anyway, what happens here is it will do a map. And then it looks like couple I don't really know. I'm guessing what this means is that it's going to say, okay, well, all of these things that I've mapped out separately, how do they fit together? So it's going to say, okay, what are all the connections between these things, and what are the connectors and how do they fit? I think that's what it's going to do. And then critic is going to say, okay, I'm about to give all this back up to the orchestrating agent. Go fact check all of these things. So it's going to say, hey, if this is this actually all true? Go check. And it's going to probably send an agent to go and fact check. And if it finds problems, then that's another thing. It might spawn another phase, or it might just be part of the critic phase to say, we're going to make corrections to the potential issues. Now, one thing that is kind of cool, I said before that, the orchestration agent doesn't need to be polling for it. It's just like the dynamic workflow that's going on itself. But what you can do is it does the dynamic workflow in a background process. So this can be doing its own things. Actually, it looks like, yeah, so this was successfully launched into the background. And while it runs, it's going to check some of the quote unquote load bearing files itself, which makes sense. So it went and it found a few things. Oh, drift. Interesting. I was thinking about starting a startup around face diffusion. Let's talk a little bit about what I want this new website to be. First of all, I don't really know. I don't have a super strong idea of what I want, but I know this. I want it to be markdown focused, where when I open up a editor, I can really quickly toggle between a markdown and a rendered markdown, or maybe even see both at the same time, but really keep it, not trying to hide the fact that it's markdown focused, and just leaning into the fact that it's going to be a very simple markdown focused editor. And I'd like to have a list view where I can see all of the different documents that I have in my subfolder of this B2 bucket that we have. I think I want the B2 bucket to have a hierarchy where it's like documents, username or user ID of some type, and then maybe within the bucket it's partitioned by month or something, where each month splits out into a subdirectory. But then across all of those, it's the documents themselves, the document.md files. That would be ideal. And so I'd love when I log into the website for be able to see a reverse chronological list of these files, to be able to search through them, and then just be able to click on one for a detail page. Obviously, I'd like to be able to create a new one as well. And then when I click on one, I want it to go full screen, where I'm in a full screen detailed editor mode, where I'm editing the file, and maybe even just in normal markdown. And I would like a little column on the side where I can type to an agent. And in the right-hand column, I can say, hey, I'd like to do some research. I'd like you to insert something here. But I also want to be able to select something. So yeah, let me think about this. I don't know. Actually, I don't want all that much AI in this. Honestly, here's one of the things I'm thinking about is when I want to create a document with an idea for one of these videos. That's kind of what my use case was today. I wanted to put links to certain tweets, and it was going to be easier if I could just have an agent that would go find all the links, right? It would have been great if I could have just said, this is the overarching social media post that I want you to go find, and then, go find the one by this. It's a little hard to describe. Well, let me give an example. So when Jensen Huang created his post, I would be great to just be able to say the tweet by Jensen Huang today, and then a sub point that says OpenAI's response, Google's response, XAI's response, to be able to select all that and type a little prompt that says, go find all of the actual HTTP links and link it in here and have it go off, agentically go search the web, find the right links, swap out those links in the doc, and then have it be undoable so that I can always back. So that's the other thing, is somehow saving a versioning information about stuff. I don't exactly know how we do that. In my directory scheme that I was talking about, it would be documents, username, month, and instead of it being each file is actually a directory where the directory has timestamps. Timestamp.md is a new timestamp.md, and then there's like a latest.md or current.md, which is like a symlink to the latest timestamp. I think that probably makes the most sense. That way we can still do prefix scanning on your user ID and get all of the IDs and do a multi-fetch and grab everything in a pretty reasonable way. I'm thinking about how to design the system such that it doesn't need a database. All it needs is prefix scanning on B2. If I can get that as a property, then I think we're in a good place. Also, this isn't going to be something that is going to be used by a lot of people. It's mostly going to be used by me. In fact, I might lock it down so only I can use it. And then I'll continue to work on it over time. I would like it to support my old use case of like I rant into a document, but I think it's already will be supported. Because thinking about this, start a new document, I open up the dictation button, and I just start ranting into it. And then I basically do edit select all, and I say, this was using voice dictation, please clean it up. Like these days, these models are good enough to do all of that. Like I could say, turn it into a good markdown document. One thing would be cool is if I didn't need to select all, like if I could do a document level comment. Also, since it seems like I'm going to be doing this agentic sidebar, inside the directory. So if it's going to be documents, username, or user ID, month, document ID, timestamps with all the different ones, there should be a subdirectory in there called chats or sessions, let's say. Because chat feels a little bit anachronistic. So we would have like a sessions subdirectory where in there it would like plop a JSONL of each agentic rollout as it's doing these things that I'm basically requesting that it does. And in the sidebar, I guess like for that side thing, I'd like it to use Pi coding agent just because it's so hackable and so easy to use. It's so pluggable, and I've also got a lot of experience with using it. So even though I'm not going to use it as I actually don't really like Pi coding agent as the thing that I interact with, but I do like it as a programmable agent surface because they've just handled so much of the stuff for you already. Is this not done? So this is still, it's interesting. This has really kept going with its stuff. I have enough now to write the map, but it's like doing the map. It's still got, I guess I'll just wait. Like I do kind of wish I had the transcript of my session that I just had with the video here. Like I've just gone through and described in pretty intimate detail all of the stuff that I want to see, what I had it in the past, the future. Like it'd be nice if I could just stop the video right now, transcribe it, and then paste that in. Clean slate. It's asking me, hey, do you have any existing data you want to keep? Where do you want to do? Do you want Docker Hub or GHCR? I'm just going to use GHCR for now because that's the standard that's provided by Google, and I don't really want to deal with anything else right now. Do I want it to be public with RSS feed, or do I want it to be a private app? I think I'll make it public, but I am going to change the URLs because it's kind of a bummer that I lost all the data, because I had like a couple of good posts out there, and maybe they were a little bit of slop, but it would be nice to go back to the original rant that I did and maybe polish them into a better output. It's funny because I was searching for it earlier. Neural column. I found it. It was the dawn of truly personal AI. Picture this, you open your social feed and every post feels like it was handpicked by someone who knows you better than you know yourself. Yeah, this was fun. I vibe coded a vibe blogging app and I was blogging with it daily. It was like 3 or 4 days in a row, but obviously I trailed off. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. Still waiting for this map. Okay, couple. Let's see what couple did. Coupling synthesis, critic. Accuracy and completeness. Those are 2 good lenses. I'll just start typing what I want. Actually, that's a good way. I'll just start typing. Okay. And I'm going to try and put down a lot of what I said in this rant so far, in like my talk so far. I'm going to say, okay, in this version of the app, it was mostly about ramble. Wait, what did I call it? It was like think out loud to article pipeline. Problem was it was outputting content that was low quality. The concept was good because I would spend 15, 20, 30 minutes speaking out loud and putting out all this great information and context. But it didn't matter because after all of the cleanup improvements and blogification, it always resulted in low quality content. Now I have need for a new app. Can't find anything off the shelf. This is a great repository. Purpose. What am I looking for? I want it to just want a simple markdown editor. It leans into the fact that it's markdown and it doesn't try to write the entire article for me unless I want to log in, see a list of my documents, be able to click in and see the actual markdown and the rendered article. Maybe if screen space allows, it could be cool to see them side by side so that I can edit the markdown, come back with edit suggestions that it proposes, and I accept or decline. Think about how cursor, the IDE worked for code in the early days, but very rudimentary and only about markdown documents. In the current website, it is backed by SQLite, and that is the source of truth. In the new site, I want it to fully lean into the idea of the source of truth being Backblaze v2 bucket. I want to be able to, and then multiplex reads to fetch their contents. I'm thinking of a scheme like this. Documents, user ID, we can look up past session, maybe a drop down on the side of the chat. Implicit in that is that I'd like to use high coding agent to do the agentic work that is asked, that is requested user. Because it's great, it works with every single open source or closed source model and gives us all the hooks we need to customize as we need into future. And okay, so I'd say find all the tweets that these bullets refer to and place their links inside the empty. Hopefully I don't leak anything. No, that's not it. So I have this is a spoiler. This is the doc that I've been playing around with into this. I'd like you to think this all through, map it all out, surface any issues. A last thing. In addition, I'd like to be able to menu or something and select publish and be able to publish version of the document publicly with a publicly accessible URL. So think about a one-off blog post or article. For now, let's not do an author feed or RSS or anything publish that you can edit and revise the markdown, publish over your existing publication if you want to make edits. I do think you should be given full agentic control over the look and feel of the one-off publishing. So maybe there's some kind of agentic conversation that creates the CSS and publish CSS for each. I think I'm correct. We can get everything we need CSS Zen Garden style, customizing markup of each application. Ideally, it would be great if we could publish these to a specific subdir in the Backblaze v2 bucket and find a way to serve directly out of is default private. So you'll need to figure out a way of selectively for some subdir or on a file basis to make those HTML documents high quality. I also do want to be able to search through the markdown files from the list view. So when I log in and I see that list of markdown documents, and let's say it has been a few months and I have hundreds of documents, I would like the ability to search those documents and quickly click through to edit or revise or review. Simply view the document that has been searched. But I'm just gonna, for this particular one, I've written so much out. I do want it to come back, ask clarifying questions. Don't make too many assumptions. I also find it's useful to set some stakes, especially with Claude. GPT doesn't seem to care. But with Claude, if you say this is really important, will serve as the foundation of my digital platform for the next while. So I want you to be deliberate, care about details and extra flourishes, getting things right, and whimsy, and not whimsy, continue and iterate and serial, but please don't print it out for anyone else to see. Okay, and I'm going to say this is really important, and adversarial review and continue relentlessly iterating until you have high confidence one thing I want to point out. I strongly value simplicity and elegance. Don't overcomplicate or over-engineer. The best solutions are as simple as they are effective. Elegance is paramount. Okay, all of this, I just spent however long, that was like a long time. I kind of want to see what did it say? The workflow is complete. Corrections to what I told you. Okay, missing dist fails the image build loudly. Okay, so this is talking about like implementation details about the build process of the old directory, which I don't care about. I think this is all going to just be deleted. The www redirect claim was unfounded. Yeah, this is doing the right things. It's looking up the B2 stuff. It's looking up Pi coding agent. One thing I will say is this correct anymore? Let's see. Oops. I don't know why in my current install I can't use the copy stuff. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's right. It's still this. It's Opus 5, for example. It's amazing how much stuff changes in the world of LLMs. It's always best to make sure you're coding to the latest API versions. So this is, you can hit Ctrl-O in Claude Code and start to see what's actually coming back. So this is kind of coming back and saying, okay, it looks like you can launch in this RPC mode. It can stream events to a file. The file has these different prompts and things like these lines that will come out of it. You can see like the message comes out in this format. If you have an image, it's base64 encoded into there. The response comes back and looks this way. You can steer, follow up. This is great. It's saying, these are all the different tools that are created and used by Pi. These are some of the instance methods of like what you can do with the Pi APIs. Let's see if it's going to come back to me with questions. Sometimes it just gets excited and just starts going. And other times I want you to, first I'd like you to think this all through, map it all out, surface any issues. I said, tell me what you think of as how to be better, ask clarifying questions. But this is kind of almost like a suggestion. I think there's a decent chance it's going to just go ahead and start working. If it doesn't have any questions, if it doesn't want to ask any follow-up things, if it feels like it doesn't have, like I've given it enough that it doesn't need to make assumptions, it will go through. But let's see. What do I think of the concept? The pivot is right, and I think you've diagnosed view 1 correctly. The failure wasn't the pipeline, it was that full, okay, blah, 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 blah. Your motivating example is not an editing task, it's a research task. That's true. Find all the tweets, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's saying that hallucinated URLs that look plausible is the single worst failure mode this app can have. And that's true. That's totally true. Actually, link verification, yeah, but I don't want to build that in part of the flow. No. Oh, useful. It's because I want to be able to say, I don't want every single link to be fact-checked every single time. Actually, maybe I do. Maybe this is right. If I ever ask it to create a link and that link is wrong, it's never going to be right. It's never going to be a good thing. Unless I say, please create a dummy link and it's not going to link to anything yet and something will exist there in the future. Maybe. Okay, I'll think about that. Extraordinarily high quality basic markdown editor is the load bearing requirement and the hardest one. Yes. It's also the one with the least AI in it. Yes. Everything else, agent panel, publishing search is comparatively mechanical. I'd want to build the editor to a high bar first. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good way to go. Do that. Pi integrates cleanly. Pi has no web tool, but I did know about that versioning stuff. I've always just never used it because I didn't trust it, but you know what? Let's give it a shot. The platform has the features should work. B2 list file versions should be exactly what we need. That would be great. Okay, that's fine. I was thinking month to just make it easier to scope down. But you're right. If we don't want it, if we don't need to scope down, let's just try without. If we need to if we move a bunch of files and do a migration, fine. Add one index object. Okay. The list view becomes a single get instead of a list plus nget. Excerpt. I would push back on excerpt though. Well, let's answer the questions first. Okay. What else is here? Okay. Drop month. Add an index object. I agree with that. Serve published documents through the backend, not from the bucket. I don't have a strong opinion. I was thinking to not go through my site because it adds an extra hop, and I like this better. It looks so much nicer. I don't mind this too much. I don't think that's true. I wouldn't really want to post this on social media. Okay, I'm convinced about that. Write the backend in TypeScript. Fine. I don't care about Python. I don't care about I'm not writing this code anyway. Totally agree. Your ZSS Zen Garden instinct is right. Fix a stable semantic markdown context and let the age. Okay, that's good. Issues I'd flag. Autosave versus versioning granularity. If every debalanced autosave creates a version, a single writing session produces hundreds. That's cheap in storage, but makes history hard to browse. This needs an explicit answer. I want it to automatically save a version, but then if I hit Ctrl-S, that gets like a bigger save. Like it gets a save that also gets marked in history. Explicit save and a very debounced autosave. Like it autosaves after a minute of no activity. I'm thinking about the case where like you Alt-tab to another tab and you stop thinking about it and then you close your whole browser. It's like, oh crap, I completely forgot. I think if it's a minute of no typing, we save. Okay. 2 tabs, 1 document. No transactions and object storage means last write wins. But let's see, what's my available models? So if I can go find it without me leaking it, that's best. Okay, when should a new version of a document be? Okay, I'm gonna say I want it to happen with explicit on meaningful pause. Let's even say 45S, but also provide Ctrl-S and or save button on the screen so that it can always be done explicitly. Generally, I try and make it just build its own, but this is one of those ones where I know so many people have done this before that if it just looks up and sees the other ones, it'll get a sense for maybe some of the edge cases and things it won't think of right away. Generally, I don't want it to use necessarily. We'll see what it does. I'll let it choose kind of its own thing. If it just wants to use a third-party thing, I was going to say for it to learn from it and then build its own. We'll see what it does. The tools allow list. Okay. That's fine. Okay, so everything is resolved except one decision. Users, multi-user schema, but single account shipped. That's fine for now. Model is going to be OpenAI GPTOS for start. We already have a Grok key. We're going to use PyWeb Access, Print to Brave. We're going to use the key found from there. That's fine. We're going to autosave every 45 seconds or Control-S or a save button. We're going to proxy these things. We're going to use the native file versioning of B2. We're going to use a TypeScript backend instead of Python. I like saying Godspeed. Claude tends to get really excited when you say that and really goes well at the beginning. But you can't say it multiple times. It has to be in the kickoff thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just in my head. Okay, I totally agree with all that. Continue until you are highly confident that I will be happy with the result, given all I've explained. I'm expecting high quality design, highly tasteful, elegant architecture, and responsive and quick interactions, as well as feature completeness. Oh, also use dynamic workflows as much as you see fit. Don't skip on those. The idea is that, like, I know that if it uses a bunch of dynamic workflows, it's going to just get better results. And sometimes if you don't tell it to explicitly, it goes back and forth between how much it uses and how much it doesn't. But I think we should just push it towards using them, because that'll push it towards being really efficient and effective with its tokens, from my experience and from what I've seen so far. I think pressure test is a new Claude 5-ism, because I've seen pressure test like 4 or 5 times already, not just in this session, but in the previous session when I played around with Opus 5. I think smoke test is when I first started seeing smoke test appear in Opus 4.8. Now, it's funny because like all people say they'd never heard of a smoke test before this, or they'd never heard of an M dash. Like these are all things that were really good practice and things that were good to do, but they just get when the agent does it every single time and talks about it every single time. The one thing I don't remember talking about is the word seam, a seam in the code base. But it's a great word that really what is true about a code base in that there are these different areas, naturally different sections that don't necessarily completely cleanly map out to like files or directories. Like a directory is an obvious place to think about being a seam, but there's also like ideological seams where like there's this portion of the code base is all dedicated towards this one thing, or like there's seams within a file. Like within a file you could have different, I don't know, I just think it's like an interesting and good way of describing differences of kind in a code base. Let's like switch over to the next thing and we'll kind of wait while this goes. I'll check in as things happen if I need to like steer it or do something. But generally I feel like this is kind of what I did with this was really put together a relatively full description of what I'm looking for. Well, like even with a specific example. And then here I answered a few of these clarifying questions, and I feel like we've gotten to a reasonably complete description of where it has a good understanding of where I want to go. Now, I haven't given it anything about the design I want or like the look and feel or like, I don't know. I haven't gotten into specifics about like the way that I would prefer the markdown to look or the markup of the HTML to look as it comes out. Oh, let's see what this is doing. Design, critique, synthesize. I love it. That's music to my eyes. I love this critique loop where it's not just going to spit out the first thing. It's like just like in code review where you write some code, you get it to code review, you improve the code, you maybe do another code review. That's the same loop that this is going to do here. I love it. And hopefully it does that with every aspect of things. So this is going to be the first editor. This is just the editor design. We're not even getting to the point. Oh, I guess it's talking about Pi integration and auth. And so we'll see how far it goes. But now that we've given it a reasonably complete description of what we're doing, I answered all the questions. It's going to be able to mostly just go. So because of that, let's switch gears. I'm going to go ahead and open all these in tabs. I have to say, this is not good. I wanted to have this on a different post or a different tab or something. You're seeing the entire plan. I'm not a good streamer yet. Also, I need to put it on another monitor so that it's easier. I'll figure it out. Oh crap. This is all out of order now. Spoilers. Actually, let's start by, this is awesome. Let's start by just reading the letter out loud. Let's read the letter, and then I'm going to go in and like talk about some of the responses to it, and then talk about some of the reactions of the industry and where I think this is going and what I think about it all. Okay, so this is the letter. Open weights and American AI leadership. In the 1980s, early open source software pioneers challenged the prevailing belief that software would advance only if companies kept tight control over their code. This movement pushed for a transparent ecosystem where developers around the world could study, modify, and improve software. Those are some key terms too, and those are kind of important because just because you can read code doesn't mean you can modify and improve it. And so that's an interesting distinction that they're making already right there. That it's not just about accessing the code base and having open source available, but also that you could modify it and improve it yourself. Software developed by the open source community now supports most of the internet and underlies systems used by the world's largest technology companies, as well as the US military and federal agencies conducting scientific research, cybersecurity, and other critical missions. That's true. Linux, BSD. Also, think about this. Like every browser that we use is based on what used to be KHTML from the KDE project and so KHTML turned into WebKit, which turned into Chrome. And not only that, but like BSD, which was originally an open source software, turned into the Mac kernel and into Darwin Core. So all of the stuff that, even if you're using a proprietary operating system like Mac, or if you're using Chrome, I guess Chrome itself is open source as well. Open source did more than lower the cost of software. It created a shared foundation of knowledge on which generations of American engineers and entrepreneurs built their institution. Sovereignty, that's an interesting term too. The United States now faces a similar choice with artificial intelligence. Our AI leadership will be judged not by one frontier AI model, but by whether the United States builds a strong, open ecosystem that diffuses into every sector. That's interesting. This is essential for creating opportunities for innovation and prosperity across the country. It requires expanding access to AI, encouraging competition, robust application layers, and giving Americans greater control over the technology they rely on. Open weight models, AI models that anyone can download, inspect, modify, and run on their own infrastructure, are an important part of that foundation because they make advanced AI more accessible, adaptable, and widely available. And what's interesting about this is that they very clearly call it open weight. There has been a debate in the ecosystem, in the community, around what to call these things. And open source seems like not quite the right word, because open source means that you could completely recreate it. With an open source program, you can recreate the binary file, you can recreate the exe file, you can recreate the APK, whatever that executable is, you can recreate it using the source code. And with the open weights models, you're not necessarily getting the ability to do that. You're getting kind of the final product. But they do make a good point that you can inspect, modify, and run. You can modify these open weight models. You're modifying something where it's not entirely clear what went into it in the first place at all times. We'll get into different distinctions later, but there are some models that are not just open weight but open source, and those provide every single data point that was trained on and the order it was trained on, such that you could run a script on your supercomputer cluster with tons of GPUs. And over time, over a lot of processing power, you'd result in the exact same model. And what's cool about that, an open source model, is you can make changes all the way at the very beginning, at the pre-training point, before you've even gotten into fine-tuning, before you've gotten into RLHF, any of these later stages that happen, the mid-training, the RLVR, before you get into any of that, you could change the underlying documents that the pre-training is based on. And really, the way you can think about this is pre-training installs knowledge and post-training shapes behavior. So what you could have the ability to do with an open source model is change the knowledge, change what the model knows. Now, that's a little wishy-washy because it is technically possible to install new knowledge after the fact. But if you do it in pre-training, you can deeply install it. You can install the knowledge in such a way where, especially if you do rewriting, where you're paraphrasing, you're rewriting, you're referencing that same knowledge, you're putting that knowledge into numerical form and then in textual form, and you're creating a much deeper representation of that knowledge that can be referenced in much better ways, if you can do all the way at the pre-training stage. The downside is that a lot of these models that are pre-trained, they're using a proprietary data. Not all the data is open sourced. If you have from your company a collection of a ton of, I don't know, diaries or something that everybody who's written a diary has given your company the ability to train a model on it, but not to give away their diaries. You could potentially train a model in such a way that you could obfuscate it and that the diaries would not ever be recoverable. I mean, that there's some open research in exactly how to accomplish that. But one way you could do is simply anonymize it, and it's learning the content of the diaries, not necessarily any of the names or nouns or happenings. Anyway, that's maybe not the best example. But my point is that your company might have bought a data set or purchased a data set or been granted access to a data set with restrictions. And so then these companies are faced with a choice. Do they close down their model completely because now it's no longer going to be open source, they can't really post the entire data set that it was used? Or do they not use that data and end up with a worse model? The model doesn't have as much good, rich data. So it's kind of this tough choice. And the balance that a lot of companies have decided upon is to do the training with the proprietary data, but then open the weights. So the weights go out to the public, but none of the source data. And in that way, you can do fine tuning, you can do post training, you can do research on those models, but you won't necessarily be able to recreate it. So anyway, that was a long rant. It's an important distinction, and I'm glad they're not conflating the two things in this document. Open weights expand access to the AI economy. Startups, established businesses, universities, and public institutions can build on advanced models without training one from scratch or paying frontier model prices for every task. That's true. I personally have used these open weights models to do research, to try things out, to fine tune and see how well I can make it perform at a specific task. But I'm still spending tons of money on these frontier models because it's not always possible to do what I want with an open model. Also, I'm not always doing research. Sometimes I just want to get something done. I did it earlier in this conversation. I'm also using it right now. Oh, let's check in on this. It looks like we're doing stuff. 3 of 5 systems, 3 of 6 subsystems. The editor's already gone through its design. We're heading into the critique mode. Okay, but this is an example of, I'm still using a frontier model. And in this case, it's to see how the model performs and to create a product at the same time. Okay. Open weights let every organization match the right model to the right job at the right cost, reserving frontier scale capability for genuine frontier problems and running efficient, specialized models everywhere else. That discipline is what will make AI economically sustainable as its use scales into the billions of everyday tasks. America wins the AI era by diffusing it into the workflows of factories, hospitals, farms, classrooms, and Main Street businesses. Absolutely. And I also have to say that, like, if you talk to people in factories and farms and classrooms, or mainly factories, these are people who in many cases have skipped out on the cloud revolution. Like, they still oftentimes they have a computer that's 20 years old that's running software in the back that just don't touch it, don't connect it to the internet, don't mess with it, because it's getting jobs done. It's getting the work done. Now, obviously, those computers aren't going to be running AI models, but the next generation is still just as concerned about cloud issues and just as concerned about lock-in. And it's just as concerned about cost overruns. And it's just as concerned about cost per task, where if we can bring these people into the AI age and we can do it through this open model infrastructure, one of the great things is that we can save costs on data centers, and we don't have to send every single request to these frontier data centers. If you had it running locally on your computer, if you have it running on your phone, we can distribute some of that work and share the load and share some of the problems, as well as being able to make sure that we're using the right tool for the right job. We're not doing more multiplication than is necessary for any given task. Open weights also strengthen competition, and competition is what keeps the gains of AI broadly shared rather than concentrated in a few hands. Force everybody to use the same few models that are used over an API. You're giving the people who create those models so much power. And I have noticed myself, after I use a model for a while, I start to take on some of the words and some of the phrases that model says. I was just talking earlier about how I'm starting to use the word seam more when I'm talking about code. So I think giving just a few companies, the ability to be the sole creators and the sole proprietors of these powerful tools that we spend increasing amounts of our time interfacing with, that we're giving them control over a lot, include our thoughts. And so the more that we can find ways to push back on that, I think it's a good thing. Anyway, this to me, it's like everybody talks about it. Sorry, I guess we're not going very fast through this, but I just need to I need to stop and pause and give my feedbacks at times. But the point is, I think a lot of people talk about AI risks, and they're worried about AI getting out of control and taking over some computer systems. They're worried about cyber attacks where people's information is locked up or used against them. They're worried about surveillance and things like that. They're worried about somehow the AI will enable people to do worse acts in the world, like create super viruses or something like that. I am mostly concerned about this idea that AI can just give so few people so much power. And if there's anything we know, it's that absolute power corrupts absolutely. I know, and to me, this is the one certainty of a problem that we're headed towards. And open weights is one of the only ways that I can think of to push back against that and to balance that concern. But anyway, I think that there are more ways we can do it. I think there are more things we can do, but I think open weights is our biggest and best lever. Anyway, okay. By allowing many organizations to build, adapt, and deploy advanced models, open weights create rivalry not only among model developers, but across cloud chips, applications, and services. That competition spurs innovation, drives down costs, and distributes the benefits of AI broadly across our economy. That is one thing. If there's anything else that I know, it's that competition is great for the consumer. So if this is true, and I think it is, that by allowing many organizations to have access to modifying, deploying these models and improve them and run them themselves, then competition is going to be great for the consumer. We're going to get better models. We're going to get better services. They have to actually compete on quality rather than competing on using access controls. Open weights also give customers greater control. As organizations invest in AI, they want to know that they will not become locked into a single provider or lose the knowledge and capabilities that they build over time. That is something that I'm super concerned about. So right now, it's relatively tame customization. When you interact with a GPT, when you interact with a Claude, it saves memory files. It saves basically markdown documents that describe things that you've done, your preferences, stuff that you've told it to remember, stuff that it wants to cross-reference and use in the future. One of the biggest research areas right now is something called continual learning. As you're actually using the model, it's going to be updating its weights, not just dropping files, but actively updating its weights and learning what you want and getting better and better. Right now, in many cases, you have the ability to request those memories or to take those memories and bring them to, but there is a possibility that in the future, if these model providers can, they will create models that you will not be able to easily extract. You will not be able to switch to another provider. And so by using an open weight model, you can be doing your own weight optimization. You can be creating your own memories for your own organization. You can be pulling in the data sets. When I talked about earlier, if you have certain data sets that you'd like to mix in the pre-training layer, those data sets will go with you for every future model that you ever want to train. You still have access to that. You still can do that. You're not locked in. And so this is a huge lever, in my opinion. Did I already read this? As organizations create value with AI, open weights allow them to own that value through self-improving models, specialized capabilities, and accumulated knowledge that drive American sovereignty and prosperity. Exactly. So as you have proprietary data you mixed in, you're learning from the usage of these models. Your models are getting better at your company's task, your company's specialty, or your personal specialty. That value and that specialty and those capabilities and that learning isn't all just going to two companies or one company. It's going to your company is reaping the rewards and getting more powerful and getting better at its specialty rather than another company that just gets to suck it all up and use it. To be sure, open weights carry real and distinct risks. Once released, the weights are beyond the original developer's control, and modified versions are difficult to trace or reverse. But the right response to this risk is not to prohibit open weights. In a world where cybersecurity attackers use advanced AI, defenders need access to models with comparable capabilities so they can detect, simulate, and respond to emerging threats. Open models broaden defensive capability, increase transparency, and allow vulnerabilities to be discovered and remediated across many teams. Yes, I am 100% in agreement with that. There was a recent story I think everyone's seen where Hugging Face was attacked by OpenAI, and they had no way of defending themselves because Anthropic and OpenAI refused to help them. They just refused. Whereas an open weight model from nowhere else than China was able to research this American company attacking French company and was able to allow the French company to at least get a better sense of what was going on. This was a microcosm of exactly all the problems that we are talking about today. In fact, openness may be one of the most important paths to AI safety and security. Relying solely on closed models is not inherently safe. I think people think that closed models are just inherently safe because you can stop the API or you can change the API or you can track through the API. But that's not necessarily so. It's not inherently so. They can still be breached, misused, or fail in ways that outsiders cannot detect, like this says. And concentrating advanced AI capabilities behind a small number of closed models compounds that risk. It results in a small number of single points of failure, weakens competition, and leaves critical technology in the hands of a few providers. Open weight models, on the other hand, allow a broad community of researchers and developers to examine their behavior, identify vulnerabilities, develop safeguards, and improve them over time. Just as open source software demonstrated that transparency can be more secure than obscurity, AI safety may depend on giving more people the ability to test and strengthen the models on which society relies. It allows for rigorous benchmarking and evaluation, red teaming, and protections tied to real and demonstrated harms, rather than assuming that closed systems are safer by default. I think like the Hugging Face hack is a perfect example of that. Just because they went to both of the closed models first, and they didn't get any help. And it was the closed models, the most closed models, not even available to anybody else, that were making the attacks. So, yeah. I also think like it's important for us to diffuse this down too. Imagine we have spam filters on our email, and they're not perfect. But imagine if your phone could be running a little spam filter, like a cybersecurity filter, on every single thing you're seeing. And if it detects that something is probably state-sponsored propaganda, you could have a slop detector where you detect locally as you're scrolling through social media. You could be detecting what things are most likely AI generated, or you could be looking or for images if you'd like to quickly check if an image was likely AI generated. This is one of these things where no, you're not going to get perfect detection. Never. You'll never get perfect detection. But something is better than nothing. And by giving people the ability to fine tune these models and distill some of these larger models into smaller models, we can reasonably think about doing that. Focus technology and running it on the cloud, running it not on the cloud, but on your end device, especially with strong distillation. A strong AI ecosystem is not a foregone conclusion. Policymakers have an important opportunity to act. This includes expanding access to compute for startups and researchers, investing in shared training assets, datasets, tools, and evaluation frameworks, and keeping the frontier plural by avoiding premature restrictions on open models that stifle competition or drive innovation overseas. These measures must also look at how strong application layers can expand sovereign use of AI across the economy. Absolutely, strong application layers. That means many companies that are specialized in many different types of AIs, where their AIs are getting better and better at those things. That's the way we can get this pluralistic situation. In shaping this ecosystem, policymakers should be careful not to conflate legitimate model development techniques with misappropriation. Distillation, or the practice of using one model's outputs to help train or improve another, is a widely used technique for model improvement, evaluation, and validation. It reflects a long tradition of learning from, building upon, and improving existing technologies, a tradition that has helped drive innovation since the rise of the open source software movement. By contrast, unlawful efforts to extract value from closed models raise legitimate concerns. Those concerns should be addressed through targeted legal and commercial frameworks rather than sweeping restrictions on techniques that play an important role in AI innovation. I think what this is getting at is two things. Number one is, if lawmakers get scared of the word distillation in general and ban distillation in some way, distillation is literally a technique that they use to make their models. Like for example, it's widely rumored that some of the smaller models, like Luna, is a distillation of Soul, or that Soul is a distillation of some larger model that they have unreleased. It's pretty widely supported or reported that distillation plays a strong role in how they can take a larger model and offer it at a smaller, cheaper scale. So distilling from your own models is a critical part of model development. And if there was some opaque law that just said no distillation of models, then you're literally cutting off a really important technique in model development. So I think that's one thing. Like, at the stupidest possible level, there would be no good reason to ban distillation just because it's such a general technique. It's a real part of model development. But then there's also this concept of hard distillation, where you're training on output from another model. And in that case, I think, for example, if you just scrape the entire internet and then train an LLM on it, all of a sudden it's going to start calling itself Claude. It's going to start calling itself GPT. And that doesn't mean that you did anything illegal. You didn't illegally access any APIs. You didn't illegally download any information. It just so happens that Claude outputs are out there on the internet. GPT outputs are out there on the internet. And oftentimes you'll try and remove those from your data set. You do a lot of work to try and decontaminate your data set and dedupe it and remove some of these behaviors that you don't want. But even sometimes when you're learning from text that doesn't even say anything about Claude or doesn't say anything about GPT, it can help shape those weights in such a way that still the model that comes out of it says it's Claude or GPT. There's debate and there's different studies that say that it happens to a lesser or greater degree. For example, there was one study that says that it can happen very strongly, but it only happens around if you're training on output of a same model architecture. So for example, if you output a bunch of text from Gemma 32B and then you trained Gemma 4B, even if you got rid of all of the Gemma stuff, it would still take on some of those properties of the larger model. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. In any case, it's often the case that you can train on random internet data, even if you've removed all references from Claude, and the model will still call itself Claude. Don't jump to conclusions and think that just because your model starts saying it's Claude or saying it's GPT, that it's done some massive distillation thing. That's not to say that it hasn't, but it's just not a smoking gun in any way. Look at me using another Claude word, smoking gun. Last paragraph here. The age of AI can be one of prosperity. With the right choices, open weight AI can expand opportunity, strengthen competition, and extend American technological leadership, mitigate risk, and ensure that the benefits of this extraordinary technology are shared broadly across our economy. That future is worth building, and the United States should lead in building it. Absolutely. And I think a point that this doesn't make, too, is that we have an opportunity to be the default, to build the default ecosystem and the default platform. I think Meta did a great job with their Llama series, where everyone called everything Llama. Llama.cpp, as Meta fell off on releasing models, Llama.cpp has ended up being a more generic platform, and it supports all these other models. But imagine if Meta kept releasing better and better Llama such that no one else could keep up. We would have a lot of people pre-hard coding things to Llama shape and pre-assuming Llama prompt guidelines. And we could have been the default, where when you were using a local model, you were using a Llama, and when you were using Llama, you were using an American created model. It's going to say the truth about various historical things, whether that be Tiananmen Square or whatever. Now, we can debate about how honest and truthful American companies are, but whatever. Let's just say for each nation in the world, you could reasonably assume that the model created within your nation would be best for your own nation. And we had the capability of being that default. But unfortunately, as we stopped releasing good models and as we started releasing more proprietary things for most of these open model deployments, and that means there's a lot of soft power that comes from that. I still think there's time for us to fix it, but it's going to be a lot harder now. They're saying that future is worth building, and the United States should lead, and we totally can. Most GPUs, we have all the best companies here. There's other companies in China and elsewhere that are coming up quickly, and they're getting a lot better. But as of right now, our models are better, our data sets are better, our companies are stronger, our economy is more aligned towards it. It's good for right now, but that won't last forever. So anyway, what really was interesting is who signed this. So you've got, I don't know who American Innovators Network are. Archie, I don't know how to say it. They're the ones who are creating some of the best. Up until recently, they were probably creating some of the best American models. They created this Trinity model, and it had 3 different sizes, and it's a pretty dang good model. You've got, I don't know, Arena actually. Black Forest Labs are the ones that create the image diffusion things. Box, I'm glad they joined. CrowdStrike, it makes a lot of sense because they have to worry about security issues, and they have to deal with the security things that were talked about here. Dell, they want to sell computers. If it only goes down to OpenAI and Anthropic, or just 1 or 2 companies, those companies will build their own computers. They will build their own chips, and you won't need Dell. So it's smart for them to say this. Hugging Face, I don't know, Emergence. Hugging Face, they're the ones that are serving all these models. They also have a reasonably robust inference business. So they're the ones that stand to benefit the most from this open model push, because everyone goes to Hugging Face. They're the new GitHub. They're the GitHub for models, and that business will only get better as open models get better. IBM, same thing as Dell. They want to sell computers. They want to sell chips. Linux Foundation, they're just ideologically aligned. They want to make sure that things don't get locked up behind a key. Mariana Minerals, guess what? If there's a bunch more people making a bunch more stuff, they're going to have more demand for their copper, their minerals, all the stuff that go into making chips and making data centers. I don't really know about this one, but it makes sense. Meta, look, they were the original Llama creators. They understand about the commoditizing the complement. They understand about the benefits of this open source stuff. I wish that they had a really great model right now. I think they wish they did too. I also wish that I just feel that they unfortunately took the turn towards closed source at precisely the wrong time. Precisely the time when they could have just benefited the most from being open. And they unfortunately seem to be playing catch up on business strategy a little. But I think if they just drop this proprietary crap and open source their latest models and try and become the de facto, I think they could be an immense player in this new ecosystem. Whereas right now they're kind of dealt out. Microsoft, they're in a little bit of a tricky position. They have like a platform where they want to be able to sell you inference, and they want to be able to sell you workloads and be able to put in place a platform where they can have that model intelligence accrue to your model. Now they have their own thinking model that they haven't released publicly either. I think they're in kind of the same boat as Meta, where it's like, why the heck aren't you just releasing it? They've got a great white paper. It's a reasonably good model, best, but their thinking model is pretty good, and I'm sure they're working on a better one. Mistral, again, a little bit like Meta, they seem to have gone a little bit more closed source, but they stand to benefit if more open source models happen. Mozilla, they're open source. NVIDIA, they stand to benefit the most. They sell pickaxes in this gold rush. But they will not benefit if OpenAI makes all their own chips, and Google's already making all their own chips. Palantir, I don't really know. They're making the case for this. They seem to be in trouble. To me, I see their business being a little tricky going forward because the models can do a lot of this stuff. They're kind of I don't know. We'll see about them. They have pretty good search implementation. They're not necessarily my favorite company. I don't really know what their focus is, but everything they do relies a lot on open source models. I don't think they would be able to do all the things they do without open source models. Reflection, they always come up in these conversations. They raise a lot of money. They have some pretty smart people there. I seen some of the people who are working there, very smart. They seem to have a bunch of compute, but they're very silent, and they seem to come up in government contexts. So I don't really know what they're doing. It's kind of an interesting one to think about. Replit, they're probably the biggest vibe coding application out there. So for them, having cheaper access to better models and putting them in users' hands, they're one of these application level, like really great applications of models. ServiceNow, Telenyx, I don't really know. Y Combinator, absolutely. If all the power concentrates in two companies, guess what? Y Combinator can't really be a thing anymore. And if Y Combinator can't be a thing, then we're not going to get new businesses, new startups, new tech stuff. And if we can't get new businesses and new tech stuff, well, then we're in for a real bad time. So Y Combinator is just doing what's in their obvious interest. So, okay, we've got all of these people, but absent from this list, it seems like there's some pretty important missing people that haven't signed it. Why didn't OpenAI sign it? That's at first very concerning. They were the first people to crack open this market, right? They published GPT-1. Eventually they published GPT-2 after a delay. They didn't publish GPT-3. They stopped publishing. But eventually they came back and they published GPT-OSS 20B and GPT-OSS. And no, those weren't the best models ever, but actually they're highly efficient, very fine-tunable, quite good models for edge cases. I'm using one in an edge case today. I'm using it right now. We literally said, I thought I said GPT-OSS. I think I did. I said it over here though. Oh, let's see how this is going. It's a little hard to read that. I don't know what's going on there. This. Okay, so we've got design, we've got critique, and we've got synthesize. Okay, anyway. So OpenAI, they've kind of gone back and forth between being open source supporters and not being open source supporters. But they do publish open source stuff, and it seems to be that they would like to if it didn't affect their business. So it was a bummer to not see them. But Sam Altman tweeted, I want the US to win in AI, both in open source and proprietary models, and I'm glad to see this. Blah, blah, blah. Why wasn't OpenAI in the list then? Funny, I don't see OpenAI in the signatures. They signed it. Let me see if I can find that. OpenAI signed. OpenAI's there. So OpenAI decided to sign it. I think that's a pretty interesting and good development. So it seems, I don't know if it was the pressure of seeing these other people, these other companies have signed it, the writing on the wall of how important this is, or if it's NVIDIA has a lot of power right now. They're the big name in the room. OpenAI still relies heavily on NVIDIA. I don't know if their relationship was on the line for this. I don't know. But OpenAI did sign this, and Sam Altman posted about it. He likes it. So whether or not they believe that, they have publicly put their weight behind this. That was one that gave. Another one that signed was Elon Musk. He oftentimes has taken a more safetyist stance on these things, or when he has all the cards, he can put his own interests first. Sometimes he promised that after every Grok version, the previous version would be open sourced. So he goes back and forth. He says something, but then they don't open source it. Their first few versions were open source, though. But for whatever it took, he agreed with this, and XAI signed it. And finally, Google was not on this list. And Sundar Pichai says, very happy to support this on behalf of Google. We have long benefited from open source and are big contributors to open source, and in fact have consistently made open weights models with Gemma available. Now, this is true. Gemma might not be my favorite models. I wish they were a little bit better, but they absolutely have from their very beginning and never stopped releasing open source models or open weight models. Now, I prefer that they release some bigger ones and stronger ones, and I wish they put their A-team on it. But hey, they have continued to open source models, and by them putting their weight behind this and signing this, I think we're in a much better place. So that means now we've got all these new ones. We've got all these signatures. We've got Cisco, Cohere. What are also some of the other new ones? DoorDash, Fireworks AI, GitHub. Fireworks makes a lot of sense. They're the ones that serve this stuff. Let's see, who else signed? Palo Alto Networks. Denny's with the massive PR win, saying that Denny's and NVIDIA both know the importance of staying open. I thought that was pretty good. When I queued this up for this video, it had like 5,000 likes. It's gotten more viral than I thought it was going to go. That's funny. But yeah, different kind of open, whatever. We'll see new memes come out of this now. But what I think is really interesting is this really struck a nerve. Originally, not that many. I mean, some companies signed it, but the big people, the OpenAI, the Google, the XAI, these are the big players in AI right now. They all, begrudgingly or not, signed on. This open letter seems to have really struck a chord. And to the point where Denny's is getting in on it and getting social media clout, 3 million views on X over this kind of a thing. So this is this kind of breaking containment and turning into. I will say that the reaction to this letter has been almost universal, and there have been very few people who have come out and said, no, I don't agree with this. Now, I think there have been a lot of people that don't agree with it, and they just don't want to say it right now. So we'll get those reactions over time. But one person who was not too concerned about voicing their opinion was Julian Schwittweiser from Anthropic, member of the technical staff. And they have a different perspective. So we don't normally hear from Anthropic. They're very closed. They don't really talk about about their opinions on things. But that closedness goes all the way down. They don't release any open source models. They've never released an open source model to my knowledge. They barely release any white papers or anything about their work. The white papers that they do release are all kind of like slanted towards alarming people, making them concerned, and hopefully they want to. It seems like every emission from Anthropic tries to get people to want to close down and oppose open models. They have a sincere belief that these things are just too dangerous, and they're the only ones that have the responsibility and enough care to protect you from the harms. They truly believe that they are the only ones that are taking things seriously. So this is what so when we get an emission from Anthropic, when we get anything, it's easy for us to sort of just think, okay, well, this must be, because they have a very active Slack channel internally where a lot of them, apparently they're always talking. Everything that anyone ever says about Anthropic is that it's all happening in their Slack channels. And so if that's true, then it's every time we get an emission out of there, it kind of gives us an insight into sort of what is their hive mind thinking? What is this cloistered sect of AI thinkers thinking about this stuff? And so he comes out with a sarcastic remark saying, I'm so excited that Jensen Huang is a believer in open source now. Looking forward to the CUDA and GPU driver open source release. It's a sarcastic comment indicating that NVIDIA is not being sincere. They don't actually believe in open source, and they're just doing this because it's convenient. And Satya Nadella coming out for open source too. Can't wait for the open sourcing of Windows and Microsoft Office. You're asking us to open source our crown jewels, but you're not going to open source yours. But here's the thing. This is conflating two different things. First of all, NVIDIA releases tons of open source software all the time. They release open models as well. NVIDIA is one of the ones that are releasing as close to open source models. They give you almost all of the source information to recreate their models, just save for a few things here and there that's proprietary for them. But those are probably being held up by legal agreements rather than ideology. Like, they probably wish they could release it all. I don't know for sure, but the Nemotron series of models is quite impressive, quite comprehensive and powerful, and they give you the entire recipe to do it yourself. Yes, it's in their interest because you have to use NVIDIA chips if you want to use their open source software. But guess what? You don't have to use NVIDIA chips to use their models. You can code your own stuff. You can inference on an AMD chip with a Nemotron model. There's nothing stopping that. They release a lot of open source software. And they do a lot of work with open source. So no, they're not open sourcing Windows. Do you really want that code base, frankly? But also, what's so frustrating about these responses is that this article is not saying closed source models should be banned. Or it's not saying that you should only have open source or that all companies should open source their models. It's just saying we should lead in open source too. We should have a strong and thriving system. We should not try and cut these open source models off. We should not try and ban them. We should not try and stop the American populace from accessing these open models. This is putting a stake in the ground saying open's not bad. Open too. Open also. And what he's implying is that this article says that everyone must open source everything, which is not at all what this article is saying. I personally would prefer it if everybody open sourced everything, but that's not what this article is saying. And that's not what all these companies are signing on for and advocating for. What these companies are signing on for and advocating for is not restricting, not preventing, and not stymieing open source models. They're saying, give open source models a chance. Allow the populace to access these things. Don't try and stop it before it gets bigger. And don't protect these companies from a poor business model, which is what seems to be the case of selling tokens, selling frontier model tokens. I don't know. But then when he got called out, he said, funny to see people jump to the conclusion I must want to ban open weight models. I actually think open models can be very useful. But it's interesting how some historically extremely anti-open source companies are suddenly all in favor of openness. And yeah, so what he's saying here is, oh wait, I didn't say anything about open weights being bad. I love them. They're great. They can be useful. But it's very interesting to see that these people who have historically been anti-open source suddenly in favor of openness. Well, it's like, yeah, actually, yeah, you don't have to open source everything to be in favor of openness in one area. You don't have to open source your crown jewels in order to open source your language models. You don't have to open source Windows in order to know that AI is an important thing to remain an open source option. So, in fact, I think some of these companies have learned their lesson. Like Microsoft, they tried to ban Linux. They tried to call it a communist threat and get the government to ban Linux and make it difficult for companies to adapt it. But now they're integrating it with Windows. They have WSL. It seems to me that if over time Microsoft cares less and less about the Windows kernel, and frankly would probably be fine if they shipped a Linux kernel and then just deal with build the operating system on top. I don't know that for sure, but that seems to be the direction they're going. So this whole response from an Anthropic employee was frustrating to see. And it's the only thing we're getting out of Anthropic so far. Anthropic has yet to sign it. They probably won't. And Anthropic in all of their emission Unlike what he says, it seems to actually indicate they do want to ban open source, whereas he's indicating that he believes that this implies that they want to ban closed source. Anthropic seems to actually want to ban open source. So it's a false equivalence when they are actually doing the thing that's the more extreme thing. And yeah, I don't want to end on that note. Honestly, this message from Jensen Huang, look, 160,000 likes, 37,000 retweets on a technical topic, on AI open weight. It's not something that you would expect to break into the mainstream and to get this much support, but it seems to have gotten just universal. Okay, let's look at the quote. Sundar Pichai, Sam Altman, leading edge researchers. We've got economists, hedge fund people. We've got NVIDIA themselves. We've got Thinking Machines Labs. Thinking Machines is like ahead of this game. They have had this game plan from the beginning to offer open source model training and customized for each customer, for each business. Thinking Machines Labs has been so on point about this. It's just that the rest of the world is catching up with them, and they seem to have hung in there and managed to get through any problems they had, and they seem to be really on track. We've got the VC bros. We've got other Google leaders. We're gonna skip past this. This has been we've got Ollama. They're the ones that build a lot of the software that runs local models for people. It's not necessarily my favorite runtime, but they actually do a great job. I mean, like, they're probably the most accessible place for people who don't know anything about open source models to grab a Quen, to grab a Llama, and get it running on their computer. And yeah, I might have qualms with some of their like sampling parameters that they set by default and some of their performance characteristics. But like, for most people, install Ollama and use an open model. So this is great. We've got like AI practitioners and commentators who are talking about this. Everybody's talking about how we've got more VCs. We've got the Chinese companies saying thank you. Imagine a world in which we're collaborating in a much more productive way than we are right now, instead of framing it as such a race. It is a race. But does it have to be an adversarial race? Or do the stakes have to be and building a better future together? The fact that this went out, the fact that it came from Jensen Huang, the leader of NVIDIA, the most profitable company, I think, in the AI space right now. I mean, a company who has just been dominating its field. And the fact that it caused so many other people to sign on to it. And then that has created this groundswell of support for open models. I'm so excited for the next 6 months to 1 year, when now I think people have a fire lit under them. People want open model to win, not necessarily against all closed models, but against complacency. Like, if you can't access, if you don't want to pay for every single query, maybe you just spin up a local model and get a bunch of work done locally. And you just want to do a little bit of editing, but you want AI support. Maybe it's helping you come up with ideas for slides. Maybe it's helping you come up with a diagram. Maybe you're working on a lesson plan for tomorrow's class, and you want to find out ways that you think you can convey the information better for students. All these ideas, these are all things that it'd be great if we could just have local models that are highly competent and work well enough for that use case. Anyway, that's my rant on that. I'm excited. I cannot wait. I think the Thinking Machines Labs are going to come out with a great model. I'm still excited to see what is Prime Intellect going to come out with. They've been building incredible infrastructure. I still want to see the Reflection AI, this company here. They're talking about open source all the time. We know Mistral's been training bigger and bigger models. We know that they're fine tuning them. Like, I think that there's I wouldn't write Mistral out. NVIDIA themselves, they've got Nemotron, and Nemotron's getting better. I talked about Microsoft and Meta. Microsoft has one they could open source tomorrow. Meta has one they could open source tomorrow. I think these companies are waiting until they can kind of make a splash, one up each other, make their models even better, and then use that as a on-ramp to their inference services. And inference and all of that is going to be a hugely lucrative business for many of these companies. So yeah, I'm excited. I think there's a whole new market. Companies will exist. And as long as we don't do something stupid and ban distillation or ban open source or ban open weights, oh my gosh, that would be such a bummer. So I'm so glad this came out. Okay, let's check in. Looks like our old workflow finished. Let's see how where we're at here. I'm gonna do Ctrl-T quick. Okay, what's this saying? I wish I had scroll bars, TBH. Okay, 6 agents are building in parallel against fixed contracts. Here's where the work stands. Verified working end-to-end against the real bucket. Backend is running. I tested the full flow with curl against live B2, not mocks. Login wrong password, 401. Login correct, 200. Posting to docs without origin, CSRF. Posting to docs with origin, 201. What the heck is HTTP 201? 201 created. Huh, I don't know why I didn't remember that. Put 200. Okay. Checkpoint wrote true. Checkpoint again unchanged. Wrote false. That's good. Dedupe or prevent, I guess, overwrites with the same content. Version history 2 versions. Search queue otters. 1 hit with snippet. Misreturn 0. Oh shoot! I was gonna say something about that. That I don't want it just to be. I don't want it to just be a snippet using an LLM. That might help. That might match search terms. Anyway, we'll figure it out. Nodes strip only white TypeScript rejects parameter properties. Crashes at runtime. Oh, no enums, no namespaces, no decorators. In exchange, the server runs its TypeScript directly with no build step. That's okay. We don't need all those fancy things, honestly, if we can just do it with no build step. Ooh, good thing it caught it before it committed node modules. Oh yeah, the previous one was a Python backend, so the get ignored was for Python stuff. I didn't ask for it in the first place. I do agree that like having an index means you have a possible drift from a source of what's the source of truth. The index is potentially getting stale over time. I never asked for pretty URLs. It would be nice if we had. Source check is gone from the tool allow list. On x.com, it tops out at scene. Identical web to web search. Interesting. I like that. I don't want source check to be a separate tool anyway. I never asked for it. It invented that and then doesn't need it. Especially because I think it invented that when it saw that, hey, Pi doesn't have web search. Pi can't access the internet. It has no access to a search engine or whatever. So it's like, we need to at least fetch these URLs and see if they match. But then when I added Brave and when we added some of the search stuff, it goes, oh, okay. I can just I can confirm in the web search that it actually had that URL. And as long as I make that, we're just going to trust the search APIs. And I think that's fine. That makes it one less tool call for the LLM to make mistakes on. The 45-second version timer moved to the server. I thought it was going to be on the server already. Server timer fires even when yeah, I thought that was server side anyway. I guess I didn't read the plan well enough because I thought it was going to be server from the beginning. Okay. So it seems like it's mapped it out. It's tested. It's gone through adversarial. And now it's like going to build out the remaining subsystem. It's going to take some time. We've already gone through 640,000 tokens. And it seems like we're going to do a lot more. So I have queued up 2 interesting projects that I want to bring to your attention. Cool projects. And I think both of them are really interesting. The first one is this blog post by Liquid where they're calling it AntiDoom. And it's titled Reducing Doom Loops with Final Token Preference Optimization. And this animation here is actually pretty great, where it demonstrates the high level thing of what it is, and we can talk about and show in detail what this is. So let me actually refresh the page. So I wish I could restart this. Can I restart? This is a great little video, but it's not. I wanted to pause it and tell about different things. But anyway, if you've ever used a local LLM, especially a really small one in the 200 million parameter range, or even up to a 4 billion parameter model, you'll see that oftentimes what happens is you'll get into a thing, it'll start responding, and then it starts to get into these loops where it goes like, wait, let me check. Especially if any of these things use thinking tokens, it can oftentimes get into these really annoying loops where it goes, oh, let me consider one more thing. Oh, let me consider one more thing. And it never stops. And once you start to get into this loop where it does it a couple times, it seems like it can't ever get out of that loop. So what this company has done, Liquid, they specialize in small models. They have this LFM series of models, which are really powerful for their small size. And it's maybe questionable if they're better than some of the other models out there at the same size. But for some tasks, they are the best models out there for that size. Maybe not in a general sense, I don't know. But I've tried them in a few tasks and have found that certain use cases they are very good at for what they've been trained on. But they do suffer from this doom loop problem. But I've seen this doom loop problem in Qwen 4B, for example. And what they found is that it comes from cases where, as an artifact of training, certain tokens, once you get to them in a certain way, are overtrained. So that once you get here, it always seems to want to pick the word wait. It always wants to pick the word wait. And it comes down to this one word, wait, is overtrained in this part of the geometry of the output. And so what they've found is that you can, instead of trying to do full fine-tuning training on correct, non-doomable, non-looping things, whereas you could, if you had a perfect corpus that perfectly represented everything in the perfect way, and it was large enough, and you could train over it with a large enough batch size over enough iterations, and there was enough diversity in that corpus, you would never have these doom loops. But it just so happens that the corpus isn't always like that. And these small models, when they're learning these functions, they're a rougher approximation of the underlying geometry than some of the other ones. So they jump a little bit and they create these certain tokens that are overweighted. And that's the problem, right? So one of the solutions that you could think about, the commonly applied inference time fix, is to sample it differently. You put a penalty where it says you weight the previous tokens, and if you see those same tokens in that same order again and again, depending on how the repetition penalty is implemented, in which sampling mechanism downweights those same sequences for the future. But what happens if you actually need a wait comma later? So by pushing down those weights and fixing it that way, it's like a hard hammer that's hammering all the future tokens that might be sampled from that with this one nail, or hammering all the nails with that one hammer. And it's just a very rigid way of approaching that. So what they found with this approach is to literally find the specifically overtrained tokens and then find and generate alternate tokens that will take it in a different direction, and then do a targeted readjustment of just that token. And if you can find enough of these looping situations, you can find all those individual tokens and make small little tweaks in all those little areas on one token on just a subset of the layers. I think even it said, check this out. On an early checkpoint of LFM 2.5 and a 2.6b model, 10.2% of completions on hard math encoding prompts produced repetitive loops. After AntiDoom training, that rate fell to 1.4%, with eval scores improving. Because if it gets into this loop, it by default, it can't get to the answer, or it screws up. So that 10% was guaranteed failures. Now with 1.4%, it might not get the right answer still, but it's not guaranteed failure anymore. And it says overtrained tokens plus uncertainty. So if it's in a case where it's uncertain, and then it sees this one token that's overweighted, it's going to go there every single time. And then once it's gone into a loop, it just sees a repetition loop, and it's been trained on next token prediction. It's more likely to repeat than not repeat, and that kind of reinforces the problem, right? And then greedy sampling is when you're always taking the most likely token, always the most likely, which is how you guarantee, or how you would reduce diversity in your output. So you'd usually get the almost exact same answer. If it's perfectly greedy, then you're always getting the exact same answer. In production systems, sometimes it depends on your batch. It depends on some of the rounding math stuff when it comes to the attention mechanisms. Like flash attention does slightly different math, and it rounds differently potentially sometimes. And so there's differences in where you end up in the context. You can potentially not get exactly the same output with greedy sampling with temperature-zero. That is just due to differences in implementation in practice. In theory, at temperature-zero, you should always get the exact most likely token. And what this is saying is, because of these individual overtrained tokens, temperature-zero sampling, since it's always going to pick that token, it makes it the worst it's going to be. So what did they do? They created they generated a bunch of completions. They found a prompt mix that was designed to elicit that looping stuff. And we can actually go and look at the data set. So this one is like a math problem, for example, that says, does efficacy of xamide eye drop on mast cells and eosinophils after allergen challenge in allergic conjunctivitis? It's asking a difficult medical question. And oftentimes, I think you're going to find these questions are on the most difficult stuff because it requires there to be a high amount of uncertainty. So it's going to be math problems. It's going to be these kind of medical questions and things like that. And these are ones they know because they've tested on their own data sets, create these poor outcomes. So then they find these looping samples and they find the specific tokens where it starts that loop. They look at the other thing, you get a full probability of every token. So you can go, even though the one is overtrained, you still have other ones that come up in the probability set. So the idea is like push those up a little bit. And so each training row is then comprised of a prompt prefix, one rejected token, and one or more chosen tokens that you want to push up. Then they've developed this final token preference optimization, which is a slight deviation on the DPO algorithm. And DPO is a direct preference optimization. With DPO, you give it a good sample and a bad sample, and you train on the negative KL divergence between the two, something like that. And this one says you're not training the entire difference between all of the tokens that follow. You only train on that sequence. Only that sequence and specific token sequence. You generate multiple chosen sequences. So with a DPO, you're doing bad and good with different bad and different good. And generally, it's that way. This one, you're saying you're taking a bad and you're generating a bunch of good ones, right? And then the KL loss is implemented in logit space. So it avoids gradient pressure. So it's doing it in a slightly different way. And then they also do some regularizations. Really, the point is DPO is a bigger hammer, and this one is a smaller scalpel where they're saying we want to just do this slight swap. We're going to take those lower tokens and push them up by just a little bit. And they did it with LoRa is a way of using fewer parameters to where you're not training the entire model every time. You're basically inserting a small layer in between all of the layers, and that small layer just nudges things a little bit in a little direction. And those layers that are slotted in between are tiny, just tiny little layers. But what they're saying is they actually use not so tiny little layers. So oftentimes when you slot all those LoRa layers in between all those other ones, you're going to do like 8 by 8, like 2 little 8. But in this, they're actually doing slightly larger ones. They're using 128 by 120 count vector and 128 count vector, or 256. And so these are actually relatively large LoRa's. But they did some evaluation and found that does the best. They also train the LM head. So that's they're training more than just those slots in between. They're also training the representations. And it's easy. They also found that they have to stop. They can't overtrain. This is supposed to be a scalpel, and it really needs to be a scalpel. They can't use a lot of stuff. But look at these results. This is incredible. Quen 3.54b, 22.9%. Is this percent? It's not super clear what this scale is. I think it's percent, because before it was saying 10% down to 1.4. And with Qwen 3.54b, this is a massive improvement. I noticed Qwen 3.54b doom looping all the time. And by doing this training mechanism, they're able to take this down to from 22% down to 1%. That's incredible. Like that means that 23% of the time, it was failing to get the task done. It was getting, and in a very frustrating way. And now it's only 1% of the time. That's amazing. Oh yeah, 22.9 to 1%. Insane. If you change your sampling parameters, how does this help? And this is saying that even with like a really high temperature, it's helping with that as well. Oh, it's making it worse. Wait a minute. What am I looking at? Okay. As temperature goes higher from 0 to 1, you're getting less deterministic. After AntiDoom training, the checkpoint sees a drop in performance at temp equals 1. This is expected. It's generally understood that higher temperature sampling can harm performance, as the model is more likely to select less preferred tokens. That's not... I've actually read papers that state the opposite, but maybe it's slightly different formulation. I have read a paper that said that higher temperature sampling can reach solutions that are impossible at temp-zero. Which makes sense, because at temp-zero, you're always going to get the same solution, and if it's wrong. But at a higher temperature, you might miss more often, but you might hit something you could never hit before. So I guess both make sense. But at higher temperature, sampling can harm performance, as the model is more likely to select less preferred tokens. There's been a prevailing wisdom that higher temperatures may be preferable for reasoning models, allowing them to explore the solution space. However, this intuition may be misplaced, being conflated with the dominant effect of doom looping. Once doom loops are eliminated, stronger eval performance is seen with near greedy sampling, at least in the models tested here. That's interesting, actually. I guess I missed this in my first read through. So what this is saying is that like we might be discovering through this that the wisdom was wrong. The problem was it was fixing the doom loops that made the performance increase, rather than what I said earlier, with it being able to sample and hit higher heights. Interesting. I don't know. Qwen 3.54b shows an even greater performance uplift after AntiDoom training. I can't believe that number. That number is insane. It's great. The pattern is the same as the LFM 2.526b, where the largest benefit at low sampling temperatures and performance degradation nearing temp equals 1. Qwen suggests using 0.6 as their samplings. That kind of makes sense. If they might have seen graphs like this internally, that might be why they suggest 0.6 from the beginning. But if you can get this to work properly, greedy sampling might be the way to go, or something closer to greedy, something like a 0.3. That's really interesting. I actually had skipped over or hadn't noticed and realized that higher temperature sampling thing. And at the end of the thing, they actually give you a link to the AntiDoom code base. So I've actually used this. I downloaded it. I used it. I was playing around with the 4B model to see, okay, if we're doing these surgical edits, can we surgically edit in the reasoning traces? Can we surgically get reasoning to be better? I was unable to get it to do that. I built a small data set and trained on it, and it didn't push too much in one direction or the other. But it was just like but this idea of these surgical edits of single token and using like some of these techniques here, I think is really cool that they have it just available. And what's really cool is that I hadn't realized from reading the blog post, but when you look through here, you can see that there's actually, this whole thing is kind of based on an existing project called Anti-Slop, where they were originally trying to use this technique, and successfully did use this technique to sort of remove all of the M dashes, or prevent it from overusing negative contrast, and to do some of these, and to make it pick different, less slopified tokens, like where we've seen these repetitious patterns. So I think it's really cool that this concept, which was originally designed for anti-slop, is being used now for this, like preventing this doom loop situation. And so even though I wasn't able in my research to come up with like a better use case for this than doom or slop, I do think that this concept of surgical changes that specifically this FTPO training mechanism, I think, is something that will be used. We'll find more use cases for it. So if you come up with a use case and you think of a good way to apply this in a new domain, I think that's really cool, and I'd like to hear about it. So that's one thing, this AntiDoom. Go check it out. Read the blog post. I think it kind of went past, and a lot of people didn't catch it, but it's hugely important, especially on these smaller models. And like, imagine, I just want to point it out again, 22.9%. It did not get the job done. It did not get to the right answer. And now at least it has the chance. So big improvement. The other thing I want to talk about today, the last thing actually, and actually before I do that, let's check in on our build is still going. Almost 1 million tokens, 6 out of 7 agents done. We're done build. We're doing the verify. Great. Okay. So I want to talk about what I think is one of the most exciting developments. So we talked about open source. We need to be able to own our own models and train on them. And the models should get better from the data that you're putting into it. And your company should get better and have better models because your company has the usage of the models and can train on that. Well, okay, that's great in idea, but in practice, how the heck do you do it? Well, this is the answer. It's that you have to build reinforcement learning environments, and then you have to be able to train your models in those environments. Agentic reinforcement learning environments. And what does that mean? What is a reinforcement? This is actually just not a great post, to be honest with you. It's cool as like a vibe that, hey, look at all these companies that are supporting this. So I'll just tell you what this is. OpenEnv is an open source protocol. So to make a model better, you need a reinforcement learning environment. But before you can use a reinforcement learning environment, you have to boot it up somewhere, load it into some harness or load it into some setup, and then actually train against it. And so if everybody's writing their own reinforcement learning environments, using their own tools and techniques, how the heck can we build a pluralistic and shared ecosystem around that? You can't. So this is a great first step where Meta, Reflection, Unsloth, Modal, Prime Intellect, NVIDIA, Hugging Face are all working together to create not a piece of software and not a specific data set, but a protocol, so that if you write your own software for doing this RL environment stuff, as long as you adhere to this new and burgeoning protocol, then you can load it up in all of these different places. You can load it up in your Prime Intellect, Prime RL. You can load it up in your Hugging Face TRL library. You can load it up in your Microsoft, probably proprietary web-based account thing. Like you can load it up in your Unsloth local GPU trainer. You can load it. So there's all these different PyTorch. I don't know what Meta's latest. So it's not necessarily a shared data set. It's not a shared program. Every one of these companies is probably creating platform and creating competing environments where they're all going to load these RL environments up into their fleet. They've also got their own swarms of environments that they've built over time and using a lot of their own proprietary data or their usage patterns or things like that, or using like sometimes you just will think with your head or prompt and create from scratch an RL environment. And what this is great about is that, SkyRL, another one, Axolotl, all of these things, you're going to be able to load anything that supports these protocols and train on them in a relatively uniform way. And so what this is saying, why do we need this thing? We've got agent harnesses like Claude Code, Codex, OpenClaw, and Hermes that just keep improving. And one of the things that makes them get better is that when the closed labs are doing their training, they're training with the harnesses in the loop. So the models are learning the dynamics of those harnesses. They're saying, hey, when Codex reaches for the read tool, it has these capabilities. The model knows what capabilities it has. It knows what it's going to get back when it calls that. It knows what the limitations are of that. It's tried a million times, and learned what are effective use cases for these different tools. And yes, you can try and put more and more of those harnesses into your trainer. And hopefully it generalizes across all of those things. But really, you're probably going to get the best performance when you train against your exact use cases in your exact harness. So for an open source environment, like Open Code, or let's say you're using Pi coding agent, if you're using either of those two things, and you're actually probably not getting the best performance out of these models because the models haven't necessarily been trained with them. But if you do your own post-training and you load your own environments up and you load your specifically built harness for your company and you do the training against the environments with your harness, you're going to get the best possible performance. Even you might get better performance out of a smaller model because that smaller model won't need to generalize to do a bunch of different harnesses. Because a lot of this comes in through the RL stage, not through the pre-training stage. And so, yeah, that's the bet. And also, it's not a reward framework. That's the other thing, is that you are designing your own environments. You are designing your own reward functions. So what this ends up being is a very, very, very open-ended API. From what I can tell from my experience playing around with it a little bit, if you conform to these three things, you got a reset function that does whatever it needs to do to reset your environment back to its original state. Maybe it needs to shell out to a command. Maybe it needs to shell out to Docker. Maybe it needs to delete and create a new VM, whatever it is to reset it. And then step, which takes actions in from the environment and produces observations and a reward function. The idea is the environment takes one step. So whether it's the next frame of the game, if you're doing a video game, or whether it's the next user command, or whether it's whatever it ends up being that you're iterating on, this step takes in that it's your responsibility for advance the environment of the agent into the next step. And then also in that exact step, it returns a reward function. And then state, showing looking at what is the current state after every step. What is the next current state? It's set up to be able to run on a separate server so that your thing doesn't have to be running in process. Like this reset doesn't necessarily have to be calling into a library that's running in your same process. This reset could be calling over an HTTP request and then responding over an HTTP request. And then it's all being managed through an HTTP server. Whatever you need to do to make your implementation work is possible. Now, I will say that and also, since this is a protocol, it means that we can like plug in the common things. So oftentimes, like it doesn't matter exactly how it's loaded into the harness, but like MCP is going to be a thing for every single one of these harnesses. So like, how does a MCP plug in? We can start to talk about that at a protocol level. How does the sandboxing work? Where like when you want to call and run a potentially dangerous query or something that could be an open-ended program that's run and then that's built, run and then executed all in the same inline way, then you might want to like standardize on exactly how do we sandbox that and package that. And yeah, so I played around with this a little bit. It's still very, very it's a little bit scattered where like each company kind of wants to do their own thing a little bit. They're all kind of coming together to build this one form of it. And yeah, so you can actually look at like, this is a pretty good little quick start where you see, okay, you can pip install an open-end environment. You can grab an environment client. And then so now you're importing from this open-end client, and they've got some nice decorators or some nice context managers where you're setting up the environment, and as long as you're in this context, it's there. And then as it exits the context, it tears it down. And this is the thing we were talking about where it's like reset, step, state. So let's look at it. This is resetting the environment. And then you can see like there's an observation potentially. You're going to take a step. This one step is calling a tool action. It's going to say echo this message. And then you get your observation on the result. And then is there even state? Anyway, this is a really cool thing. I like to see it all coming together. I was playing around with it through the TRL stuff and through this open-end thing. And I was also playing around with it with PrimeRL has a verifiers thing. Actually, I'll just go to verifiers. So this verifiers thing is a great way of doing this because here, actually, let's see. Well, their verifier stuff is cool because instead of having to map it to that very high level thing where it's like step, state, whatever, they build on top of that. And they basically build, this is kind of like what I would like to think about. It's like the Rails of RL. It all ends up being an HTTP server in the end of the day, but this provides a little bit more of abstractions around what is an agent is a harness, model, and runtime policy. It's that tuple basically. And it provides you to be able to like do a dot run, pass it in a task, and you get a full trace on the other side. So this is like a little bit of a higher level thing. You can define an environment, and really it's a what is it? A task set. Task sets are like in their world, the kind of like unit of work. So it's like, I would like to, well, do addition or play turn in level, or I don't know, any sort of capability like judge correctness. That would all be like a task that you would want to do. And the cool part is that you can get like, you can do these tasks, you can sort of define these tasks, and you can also define your, and how the task can have LLM judges, where this is like a great example of if you want to judge how correct something is, you can prompt it where you're giving it, you want ultimately for it to output a Boolean, but you're giving it this prompt. You could customize this prompt. You're saying, here's an answer. Here's the response I was given. Is this correct? Yes or no? And then provide this parse function where it's saying, Boolean true or false, whether the word yes was found. So if yes was found, it would return true. And then you can kind of couple this to the task and the task config. And in this case, your result.parsed, it's a float, because you're going to do this multiple times, right? Like you're going to take the task judge trace task set, and you're going to judge, like this is just doing one, but you could imagine if you did this many times, you end up getting this like bit. So all of these things each one of them is a nice decomposed part of it, of the problem. But the cool thing, and like, look, I haven't gone into the details. I don't know all the details. It's changed. Actually, the last time V0 is pretty different from V1. But it can all be loaded up into the PrimeRL framework and the orchestrator. And then what PrimeRL will do is like spin up the right inference server, spin up the right training stuff, figure out how to put them on different GPUs, sync them back and forth so that as it's training, after it trains for a few batches, it syncs all that to the new inference server, and the inference server is always getting a reasonably up-to-date policy, and it does all this for you. But if you want to pull in environments from anywhere else in this ecosystem, because it's now all using this open-end environment, you can use the task sets and the evaluation environments that you built here and use them in TRL or use them in another part, or you can take environments that were created from all these other places and bring them in here into PrimeRL. And that's all made possible with this new advent of open-end, which is what I think is really exciting. That's open-end. I'm not giving you a full exact accounting of everything you can do with open-end. And to be honest, it's a little messy because, for example, PrimeRL, this all kind of existed before open-end, and it's kind of being retrofitted in, and it's a little bit confusing when you're using it, whether like, is Hugging Face's thing open-end? It's a little bit confusing. It's not quite clear. They're still working it out, but the intent is there, and the movement is there, and actually the interop is there already if you're willing to dig in and look at the details and get things right. But there's a lot that's not figured out. Like if you look at the open-end thing, look at these. This is pretty sad. It's like, I don't know if MCPs is working yet. I don't know if delayed rewards is working yet. Agentic harness integration works PrimeRL, but it's not part of the protocol yet. Maybe Echo, another one that works in PrimeRL, but I don't know if it's part of the protocol yet. Like this one, I think it's still an RFC. Oh, it merged. Okay, so as of June 17th, for example, Echo is available as part of the protocol. That's cool. That's great. Echo is this idea of like alternating in between RL on the model's output and SFT on the environment response. So the model is like trying all these different things, but it's learning concretely what it gets when it does those things. So it's learning terminal dynamics. It's learning agent dynamics. It's not 100% clear that it's always a win, but I did some reproduction work where I was able to get some pretty decent wins out of it. And this is saying, like, depending on who you, there's a really great article out of Prime Intellect where they try and do a lot of reproduction of it. And you can see some of it actually does a lot better, but then if you scroll through, some of it does worse. It's not 100% a win, but there's something there. And we're kind of like getting there, I guess, is part of what I should say. So anyway, super exciting time because things are starting to coalesce. These different companies are all coming together. It's kind of related to this whole thing with Jensen Huang. Like, if we're going to be collaborating with all these other actors in the ecosystem, it's nice to start to have these standards that help us do that. Okay, let's take a look at our build. It's run server and background. It looks like so the workflow finished. Build the remaining neural column subsystems in parallel. Build workflow complete. Then it had trouble trying it out. It was trying to load it. This is great. These are all the features I wanted it to take care of all this stuff itself if it could. Adversarially review. Complete product loop. Test the whole complete product loop. That's amazing. It's built and working. Here's what I verified rather than assumed. The full loop works in the production container against the real B2 bucket and real grok. Use actual Docker image. The editor keymap continues lists inside fence code blocks. It matches markers by regex rather than consulting the syntax tree. I don't know if I understand that. The editor keymap, so the list of keys that will respond, continues lists. So if I'm in a fence code block, so I'm in like 3 backticks, I think that means. I do think that like inside of a fenced code block, we kind of don't want any of that fancy stuff. That's how I feel. But I don't know if I quite understand what this is saying. I have 2 videos, like the first intro part, and I stopped to kind of see how that turned out. And then I have this part, and I think I'm going to just give it to Claude and say, Claude, use FempEg to cut it up, edit it, turn it into a VOD, and we'll see how it does. It'll probably do terrible. I don't even know if this is going to see the light of day, any of this. In the future, I think I've learned enough that I could probably stream. I could probably do this live. This time I did live to tape. But I think in the future, like I've been really worried about this exact scenario, keys, leaking keys. It's going to be so hard to keep those keys private and secret. And I know that there are like streaming solutions for it, but I just felt like I was going to make a mistake. And frankly, it has been less hard to do that than I worried about. First of all, like I didn't even think about until that moment that I could just switch to talking head mode and then you won't be able to see the secret. But then the other thing is I'm getting pretty good at like putting the secret in a file and telling Claude to read the file and telling the Claude that it has secrets in it. And Claude is really good about not printing that secret to the screen. So far, it's hard for me to judge the Opus 5. One of the ideas behind this was let's test out Opus 5 and let's see how Opus 5 does. One thing I can say is that it's also done a great job at knowing when to and how to use dynamic workflows. It asked the right question. It expanded the feature set early on, but then it pulled back some of those things when it realized they weren't really needed. It was very, I guess, like thoughtful about how it went from the past to some of the older implementations of things to the stuff in the future. It caught the problem with the node modules that could have been a disaster if it had checked that in. Like it caught that and fixed. It seems to be doing this good adversarial review. It's doing a lot of pretty good things so far. Now I have the proof will be in the pudding. Like, did it do the right thing? Did it design the app that I wanted to? How is the quality of like the CSS that's generated? What about the usability of the app? How like complete is it, and how high quality is the usage of the code mirror. So the proof will be in the pudding to see like how good is the final result. But so far, I have to say, like, yes, it took a few hours for it to go and do everything. Like a complete rebuild of a website, migration of a website from an old infrastructure to somewhat newer. It was thoughtful about bringing in new packages, and it researched a bunch of new packages. Now, we're not really pushing it out of a comfort zone. I mean, it's pretty easy for models to do CSS and web stuff these days. We're not doing cutting edge research right now. This tab, I thought I was creating a new tab and it was loading it fresh, but I think what happened is it sent me over to this old tab, which was stale. And I didn't refresh it actively. So it was showing like the previous commit from last October. It's funny that this already had 105 commits. I don't remember doing a lot on it. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I have corroboration. Okay. Interesting. It didn't change this. 10 months ago, it still didn't change any of the Claude.md. See what? It must have found it to be pretty good then. It said, okay, core principles, hooks only, no class components. I don't remember saying that, but whatever. Explicit data flow, I like that, actually. Don't be afraid of prop drilling. Yeah, see, that's one thing, like, I didn't say that, but it picked up on that must be from my steers and stuff. But like, I think a lot of people do a lot of things to just prevent prop drilling. And yeah, in an old world of pre-agentic coding, that sucked. But in a new world, we can just enumerate everything. It's great for the models to see. It's fine. Like, and then we're just getting rid of so much infrastructure. Just like pass everything as an argument. Pragmatic TypeScript, use strict mode, but not dogmatically. Use any when types get too complex or cumbersome. Yeah, like who cares? Prioritize code clarity over perfect type safety. True. Code clarity is all. Sometimes people bend over backwards to create crazy types just to make it polymorphic on something. Minimal dependencies, I agree with this. Avoid third-party libraries unless absolutely necessary. Build focused, purpose-built implementations. Yes. This is great. I guess maybe I did tell it this. Oh, wait, this core user journey. This is all different. I'm going to tell it. Yeah, like it's drifted. It's not this process anymore. It's not this like, this was my original idea. You capture this like giant sort of ideation blob or this just like a long ramble. Then you process it into sort of a cleaned up version, generate different drafts. Really annoying to read through, but you get like bunch of different drafts, which is weird. It's weird how different they come out from the same source material. And then like this refinement loop where you're trying, but no, just the whole thing fell apart. This part was the part. Like the refinement was fine. This process to like turn it into a nice cleaned up text, that actually worked pretty. This was like the thing that encouraged me when I was using that little microphone button, dictating to my phone or whatever. It was doing terrible mistakes, and I would kind of pass it through the script, and it used all the context clues to really figure out what I actually meant and put the right words in there and retranscribe my stuff. Not perfectly, but a lot better. And so I was like, dang, this might actually work. But then it was just like the creativity of these posts, or just the quality of these posts was always slop. No, it was end of last year. Models are better. Like we were talking about M dashes last year, and this year we're talking about, load bearing and things like that. And it's a little bit more collapsed on the text generation side of things. So this says it's a lot cleaner. It says list, edit, ask, publish. No build step. I like that. B2 has no conditional rights. It told me about that. Storage layout, nice. Oh, public. Oh, that's actually a really nice design. Like the U and the P, I actually like that. I didn't tell it that, I don't think. Let me use this time productively. Launching the adversarial review pass over the code production. Honestly, I'm not mad about it, but it is being very proactively adversarial. I did ask for that. I said relentlessly, blah, 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 but it's going a little bit far. So I think like it's too early for me to tell whether I love that behavior of Opus 5 or not. That is something I like. As of right now, I kind of appreciate it. Look at, if you're seeing only like a little portion of it, like this is seemingly not coming up, Control-T, get rid of your tasks. You'll see it right away. Like, I haven't really been drinking a whole lot of water or soda, but I noticed myself getting a little bit like this over time. And I'm also realizing that during when I was working and kind of intent on stuff, I don't think I was projecting my voice as much as I should have. Like, I think that like some of it, it'll be interesting to see the audio levels over the course of the video, because I think I quieted way down in portions and I think I got very loud in other portions. And it's going to be an interesting sort of task to find a way to either modulate my voice in a more, like, keep my voice at a more neutral level across more time and just learn that as a skill, or to come up with a technical solution where I'm boosting my audio when it gets low, enhancing it in some way, and reducing it when it gets too high and spikes, and maybe like, what is it called? I forget, where it hits the top of the line, and then I forget what it's called. And then now it's doing review and verify. Reviewing security, correctness, broken windows. I like that. Neural Column is an agentic markdown editor now live at neuralcolumn.com. Not true. Single account. Blackblaze v2 is the source of truth. There is no database. Code is here. First, it records the verified constraints, and a finding that contradicts one of them is wrong, not a bug. That you must not rederive incorrectly. That's such a weird phrasing. You must not rederive incorrectly. The double negative is confusing me there. Find broken windows, states with no UI, unhandled promise rejections, errors swallowed silently, loading states that never resolve, empty states that were never designed, yeah, dead code, and anything half-built. Specifically check every error path in route and editor. What does the user actually see when the network fails, when the agent errors, when a save 409s, when publishing fails? Also check that every server error response the client can receive is actually handled by the client. Heck yeah, that's awesome. Security, correctness, so it's going to be 8 in total. Then when it synthesizes it at the end, I'm guessing it'll add something to the end. But maybe it'll just pass the whole thing back here. That's fair. Deleting a document must also take down its public page. Otherwise, the only way to unpublish is a route that requires the document to still exist. So the delete would leave whatever ID readable by anyone with the URL permanently with no way back through the product. See, I love these adversarial reviews. I love these workflows. Dynamic workflows are the way to go. And so what if it takes 800,000 tokens? What's interesting to me is that this keeps choosing Opus 5, Opus 5. In the past, I've had dynamic workflows pick Haiku, pick Sonnet, pick Opus. Maybe something changed in the implementation. But wait a minute, what about these other agents running? Come on. Okay, that's a weird behavior that I keep seeing, is that it seems like the orchestrating agent, I think it's peeking into the progress here, and it gets impatient and does it itself before the workflow has finished, because I think it's seeing these results come in and it goes, oh, I gotta fix that, but this is still verifying. We will see, but it feels like something's, like the left hand is not talking to the right on that to complete now, but then I also need to wait for this to complete and see if it does more fixes, because I think there's a good chance this finishes, it comes back with a verified set of things that have happened that need to be fixed, and then the orchestrating agent says again, oh, there's even more, and then pushes another fix, and then when it pushes another fix, we gotta wait for that again. Oh, well, this deployed at least. I wonder why this is running the rollout manually, just to like verify, because it's impatient. Because I'm pretty sure, no, not that. I'm looking for GitHub flows, CI web. Okay, but it's not actually running. It's not like rolling out the deployment. So wait, like these are just things. It's so hard to catch in code review, and Opus 5 is finding them now. Would it be better if they didn't write the bugs in the first place? Yeah, but Same with me. I'd rather I don't write bugs in the first place, and that's wishful thinking. So I wish it was better at writing bug-free code, but I'll take a consolation prize of it finds it in adversarial review. Oh, and then what I'll do is as a test document, I'll copy and paste this like really minimal sort of plan document I had for this stream today that you kind of caught glimpses of. It's like a Google Doc. I will copy paste that into there. I'll say improve and make it like a good markdown document. Then I'll publish it. And then I can basically like, wherever I post this video, I can post a link to this neural column published show notes, basically. It's been a long stream. At this point, 4 hours. I basically did this all day because I prepared for a couple of hours beforehand. I had to get OBS installed. I had to get a couple of things figured out. Actually, OBS, I spent a decent amount of time working on getting OBS configured and setting it up in a nice way. Like I wanted to blur the background because my room's always a mess. And the background removal plugin it took a lot of configuration to get it to look what I thought looked good. Okay. Did it run the rollout? Search. Not too crazy. Okay, new document. Creating it. Ooh, I like this is nice. I get a nice multi-pane layout. This is a headline. What does it look like? Oh, that's a little weird. Item 1, item 2, item 3. Okay, the width of that feels like it should be a little more contained. I did want to know. Oh, okay. Hello. World. I always forget. This is actually nice, though. Okay. So now I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this, and now I'm going to use the agent. Let's say, turn this into a perfect markdown document. I'm not going to do too much changing now. For the next time, I want a way to apply all. It gave me a long list of potential diffs to apply. I wanted to be able to apply all of them at once. I want a way to undo an application of a diff. If I decide I don't like it, I want to be able to go back. I found that it wasn't easy to start a new chat. I closed and reopened the agent, clear and create a new chat. Said, I'm unable to locate the exact text to replace. Could you point out the precise line you'd like changed? After a while, it seemed to start injecting the new content without removing the old content. It became purely additive, not replacement like I wanted. Oh, and 6, to render way offset left compared to the content. It's not visually pleasant. Let's see. Also, by the way, quick. Tasks. Seems to work. View. Why am I doing this? There we go. So I'm saying, also, I didn't see anything around publishing that let me customize the CSS. No in-product guidance. I think it's probably possible that I could type into the agent and the agent would update the CSS or whatever, figure it out. But I don't necessarily want that. I want it to be part of the product where it gives me like a button. Or maybe in the view, if it notices I'm logged in as me, there's some sort of button. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But I'm not going to follow up. This is a great start. I'm going to continue to work on this a little bit offline. I'm going to watch this as it goes. And I feel like this was a great first stream. I want to do way more of these. I'd like to cut this up and see if there's sections that could be edited and made into nice content. Otherwise, I'm I've learned a lot. I think the next time I could do better. We could even do more and better. And I think I can frame things in ways that are better to convey my meaning. Also, one thing I learned is having to have content queued up for these long build cycles and having some other content to go to and talk about or do something. That worked out great, but I need to really plan that out and have backup segments and backup stuff to talk about. Yeah. So thank you for being with me for my first stream. Thank you for staying with this if you did. If you didn't, then I don't blame you. And you're not seeing this, so it doesn't matter if this even makes it out anywhere into the world. Anyway, peace.